Chapter 1354. For 3 whole days Yang Qindong met with people from all walks of life. He got first-hand information, and through talking with these people, he had a deeper understanding of the situation in Yunnan province. On the night of the 3rd day, the travel-worn governor Luan Shaoqian finally arrived at Chui City and came in front of Yang Qindong. 4 years ago, Lin Qindong ordered the governors to be replaced. Luan Shaoqian was transferred from the governor of Laos to the governor of Yunnan province. Although he was called Governor Luan, he was not young, 28 years old. When he first took office he was only 19 years old. Now that 9 years had passed, the facts had proven that Yang Qindong was right to let his brother-in-law take the position despite the objections of the masses. Just from the results, Yunnan province had always been in the first place, far better than the surrounding provinces such as Laos. Just from this point, it was enough to prove that Luan Shaoqian's ability was reassuring. 6th Young Master. After seeing Yang Qindong, tears flowed down from Luan Shaoqian's eyes. It was true that he was the governor of Yunnan province, and it seemed that he had a high position and power, equivalent to the master of a force, but he had never had such an awareness in his heart. In his eyes he was just an official under Yang Qindong. He came to Yunnan province only to start working, in order to better repay Yang Qindong's kindness to the Luan family. Fortunately, his performance did not disappoint, and he did it to make Yang Qindong satisfied. Good. Yang Qindong also sighed and stood up, shaking hands with Luan Shaoqian. He was naturally very satisfied with his brother-in-law, and the other party's achievements also made him proud. But when he saw the real person he couldn't help but sigh. The other party's chin had a thick layer of beard. The other party was almost 30 years old, and he was left in Yunnan province for 9 years. He didn't have time to reunite with his family, nor did he have time to mourn for his parents. Speaking of which, he felt sorry for the other party. The two of them held hands and walked down together. Yang Qindong opened his mouth and said, "You've done well. The current development of the Vietnamese province has greatly exceeded my expectations. You've also completed your task well. How about it? Have you thought about changing places?" According to the requirements of the transfer system, the officials would change places every 4 years. It was just that considering that the change of a province's governor would cause a lot of trouble, this system was not implemented so seriously. But in order to prevent the situation from happening, Yang Qindong still decided to change the governor who had been in office for more than 4 years. Just to form a kind of routine, this time he asked for Luan Shaoqian's opinion. When he heard that he wanted to change places, Luan Shaoqian's eyes lit up first and then he shook his head. 6th Young Master, although I have done a lot of things here, it is not perfect. There are still some things that have not been completely solved. I want to work for a few more years to solve these problems. There are endless things to be done. Yang Qindong shook his head and said, "You have solved the problem in Yunnan province very well. The next thing will be handed over to others to do. You have to give others a chance to practice. As for you, you should go to a higher position to learn so that you can take on more important responsibilities in the future." This meant that he was going to put an important position in an important position. Luan Shaoqian was naturally grateful. "Okay, I will listen to the 6th Young Master." That's it. In this way you will be ready to hand over the work in the near future, and there will naturally be someone to replace your position. This time I asked you to come over mainly to listen to your report on the situation in Yunnan province, and also to discuss with you the issue of the protection price of food. Of course, you can put forward your own opinions on the issue of agricultural tax and commercial tax. It was already very late at night, but the candles in the study room did not go out. They burned until dawn of the next day. After the two of them had breakfast together, under Yang Qindong's satisfied gaze, Luan Shaoqian led a group of Yunnan province officials to send him to Haiphong City. Luan Shaoqian watched as Yang Qindong boarded the warship and went straight to Chichen City. Chichen City. It was no longer a small seaside city. After more than 10 years of continuous construction, it looked like a modern city. Compared to the straight cement road, there was a street lamp every 50 meters. Within a mile one could definitely see a small park. There were rows of green trees on both sides of the road. Walking here, breathing in the sufficient oxygen emitted by the green plants gave people a feeling of relaxation and relaxation. In the city, there were orderly small districts one after another, and tall buildings made of cement and steel were connected to each other. They used the smallest area to meet the residential needs of more people. Every district had a large square. At night there were people dancing, playing and selling all kinds of snacks and goods. Compared to the dark outside, this place was like heaven. The only imperfection was the hundreds of tall chimneys in Chichen City. They would occasionally emit black smoke during the day, affecting the spatial state of the entire city. Fortunately, the city lord's mansion had already paid attention to this problem, and had already considered moving the factories under the chimneys out, and building new factories in the suburbs. With the appearance of the rubber trees, there were many carriages and rickshaws on the straight cement road in the city. From time to time, one could also see some streets being paved with tracks. According to the well-informed people, track chain cars had been successfully researched, and would soon appear in the entire city and be used on a large scale. At that time, it would greatly increase the speed of people's travel. Everything developed in an orderly manner. Several warships arrived at the new dock at dawn. Then rows of cold vanguard soldiers completely sealed off the dock. A group of generals with gold beans on their shoulder plates lined up in an orderly manner and looked respectfully at the warships approaching the dock. Under the gazes of the deputy commander of the army Lung Feng, the deputy commander of the navy Gao Xiong, and a group of high-ranking officers Yang Qindong, who was still dressed in a green robe, walked out of the cabin under the protection of a group of black cavalry. He saw the group of high-ranking military officers who had come to welcome him. This time, when Yang Qindong returned, he only informed the upper echelons of the army. Whether it was City Lord Yu Qian or the ladies in the palace, he did not send any news. He did not want to affect these people because of his arrival. As for the people in the army, he had to inform them even if he didn't want to. After all, the warships in charge of transporting him were the Navy's warships. Presumably, all the news had already been registered in the Navy's headquarters. Sixth Young Master. Lung Feng and Gao Xiong took the lead and walked forward, giving a standard military salute. Yang Qindong first returned a military salute, then smiled and reached out to pat the two on the shoulder. Thank you for your hard work. Sixth Young Master, you've worked hard. Perhaps it was because they hadn't seen each other for a long time, but both Lung Feng and Gao Xiong had a trace of restraint on their faces. As Yang Xie's territory grew bigger and bigger, Yang Qindong's status also rose. It wasn't the time when he couldn't play without a certain someone. Yang Qindong still had a lot of feelings for these veterans who had followed him since the beginning. He looked at the two with a gentle gaze and said, "This time I'll be staying for a few months. I'll go to your headquarters to take a look. You just have to be prepared. For now, you guys can go back first. I'll go take a look at the city lord's mansion, then return to the palace." In the early morning of the city lord's mansion from afar, one could see a few electric lights lit up. Needless to say, those must be the workers who had worked all night without rest. Compared to the army, which was divided into the navy and army, the local government was completely controlled by the city lord's mansion. Every policy issued from here could affect millions or even tens of millions of people. Therefore, every order had to be carefully considered and considered carefully before it was issued. Yu Qian worked overtime again. He only slept for a while when the sun was about to rise. Just now the guards brought hot water over. After washing up, he sat down in the spacious and bright office and began to work. Piles of documents that needed to be approved were piled up beside his desk. Yang Xie's territory and power grew bigger and bigger. Every day Yu Qian had to deal with more and more official documents. Knowing that his responsibilities were heavy, Yu Qian never dared to slack off. Even during the new year he only rested for a day. As for the usual holidays, there was no such thing. This was not a hard and fast rule, but Yu Qian took the initiative to request to work overtime. He seemed to always have so much energy, like an old bull that did not know what fatigue was, working hard. This is the document sent by the Wei province. It contains the amount of food that has increased in their provincial warehouse this year. Take out the document from last month and compare it. Yu Qian did not even raise his head as he instructed. However, he did not know that the person standing in front of him was not his secretary or guards, but the leader of Yang Xie, the most important person, Yang Qindong. After speaking, Yu Qian still buried his head in the document in his hand. From time to time he would lower his head and write something. After a while, when he felt that the shadow in front of him did not leave, he still did not raise his head and said, "Why don't you go? Can't you find it? Didn't I say? The documents of each province have to be filed separately. Go and look for it properly." After saying all this, Yu Qian still buried his head in his work. However, he quickly noticed something and his face showed displeasure. Although he rarely lost his temper at the staff around him, when it came to work, he still dared to scold them. Yu Qian raised his head with a displeased expression and wanted to criticize her. When he raised his head, Yang Qindong's appearance entered his eyes. Although they hadn't seen each other for 2 years, this didn't prevent Yu Qian from recognizing Yang Qindong in the first place. Chapter 1355. The person standing in front of him was actually Yang Qindong. Yu Qian didn't seem to be able to react as he was stunned for a moment. Then he remembered that the battle report said that Yang Qindong would be returning to Tsushin City for the new year. He immediately got up and said, "Greetings to Bugnam of Gojoseon. Mr. Yu, you don't have to be like this. Quickly get up." Yang Qindong quickly reached out and helped Yu Qian up. Then he looked touched. Wars were fought for money and stability at the rear. The reason why the five-star army was able to win so many battles was because of Yu Qian, who stabilized the situation at the back. If it had to be said, it would be like the lyrics of the song, "Half of the military metal is mine, half of it is yours." The muscles on Yu Qian's face kept trembling as he was supported by Yang Qindong. His grip on Yang Qindong's hands tightened. "Wenan King, you guys fought well." Yu Qian grew up in Great Ming and was used to seeing the people of Great Ming being bullied by other races, especially by the Walla and Tatars. The Great Ming Dynasty could only defend and couldn't fight back at all. Yu Qian had once felt sad about this. The so-called Celestial Empire, the so-called 10,000 nations, those were just superficial appearances. It was hard to say when the flames of war would start again. The only thing the Great Ming Dynasty could do was to defend the cities. As for the common people outside the cities, they would be bullied, robbed, and even killed. Their money would be stolen and their houses would be burned down. These were all normal occurrences. Even if the news spread to the imperial court, the officials wouldn't just sigh with the emperor. Other than opening the granary and releasing grain, what else could they do? What could they do? What did they dare to do? Yu Qian was once an official in the imperial court. He was angry about this and fought for it. However, when he saw the treasury's silver and grain recorded in the Ministry of Revenue, there was only silence. The country was too poor and couldn't afford to fight any big or fierce battles. Not to mention the Mongolian cavalry in the vast grasslands. Even if you could defeat them, what would you gain? Those nomads were so poor that they didn't even have an iron pot. What was the point of winning? When the cost and the benefits could not be proportional, sending troops to the grassland would become a slogan and a great challenge for the future generations. Like the stars and the moon in the sky, they could only look at them but could not reach them. Yu Qian even thought that if this continued, sooner or later, the Great Ming Dynasty would be destroyed in the hands of these grassland wolves. Just like how Yuan defeated Song, who could defeat Ming. Every time he thought of this matter and looked at the lives of the other courtiers, they did not have to worry about food or clothing. All they did every day was fight for power and profit. This made him deeply disappointed. He could not see any hope, nor did he know if this problem could be solved by his descendants. Now, Yang Qindong's sudden appearance had solved the problem that he thought was impossible to solve. The five-star army not only defeated the grassland wolves that the Great Ming Dynasty's people feared, but they also occupied the grassland, built a city, opened up wastelands and developed businesses. This allowed countless Han people to live a worry-free life. Even the status of the Han people had been raised. Looking at it now, which of the people under Yang Xie's influence did not feel proud to be a Han person? Yang Qindong had done all these things that they did not dare to think about. As someone with a strong sense of national pride, how could Yu Qian not be grateful? No one was more touched than him about the improvement in the lives of the Han people. After all, he was in contact with this kind of work every day and received detailed data from the various provinces. In Yu Qian's eyes, Yang Qindong was like the savior of the Han people. Now that he saw Yang Qindong, he only wanted to kneel down and kowtow to him on behalf of the tens of thousands of Han people to thank him for his kindness. Yang Qindong noticed Yu Qian's excitement and was affected by it. He couldn't help but say, "Mr. Yu, this is the result of our joint efforts. We fought well because of your logistical support at the rear." No, how can our achievements be compared to those warriors who went to the battlefield to kill the enemy? Yu Qian said modestly, but these were also his heartfelt words. Yu Qian did not sit on the office chair, and Yang Qindong naturally did not sit there either. The two of them found a sofa and sat down. Then they talked about Yang Xie's situation. This conversation lasted for more than 2 hours until Beta Persei could not help but remind them, "Young master, it's time to eat." "Oh look, I'm hungry." "Haha, come bring the food here." Yang Qindong chuckled. Yang Qindong and Yu Qian talked about a lot of things for the entire morning and afternoon. They talked about the protection price of food, the specific division of business tax, and the appointment of some provincial and county officials, as well as the economic growth data. The two of them talked about whatever came to mind. In the end, Yang Qindong said, "Mr. Yu, the people are the foundation of the people. As long as the people are stable, the country will be stable. So, this prince does not want to increase taxes. What do you think? Never increase taxes. What a good benevolent government. Who mentioned the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors? who said that during the spring and autumn period, this was a true benevolent ruler. The first person in history to do such a thing was Kong Pockmarked, who built slaves. He created a prosperous era of Kong and Qian. It had to be said that Kong Pockmarked was very good at bluffing people. Later on, Master Jin and countless Manchurian remnants thought that this was a concrete manifestation of Kong Pockmarked's benevolent government. And now Yang Qindong appeared here. Naturally, this person had nothing to do with it. He became the first person to propose never increasing taxes. Although he was not an emperor, he was better than an emperor, or even better than an emperor. Since he said never to increase taxes, then he would definitely never increase taxes. Hearing this, Yu Qian's body trembled. His heart was filled with joy. After about a few breaths, he actually knelt in front of Yang Qindong. He bowed and said, "I, on behalf of the millions of people, thank Bugnam of Gojoseon for his benevolent government." Benevolent government. Good, Mr. Yu, quickly get up, quickly get up. Seeing Yu Qian so excited, Yang Qindong quickly reached out and helped him up. Then he sighed. Even a great talent like Yu Qian was so excited when he heard that the taxes would never be increased. One could imagine what the people would be like when they knew. And the so-called never increase taxes meant that taxes would never increase. The specific meaning was that the tax amount of ding yin would be fixed, and there would be no increase in taxes. The governors of the provinces would always use the ding yin as a fixed amount, and there would be no increase or decrease. The new ding yin would not be counted as ding yin, and households with more than one ding yin would only have to pay one ding yin. Of course, taxes and taxes were different. Originally, Yang Xie did not place much importance on taxes. Even when they needed to use the people, they would still give them money. It was just that it was not much. But after all, this was Yang Qindong's matter. In other words, if one day he was no longer here, would taxes rise again? And now, after Yang Qindong shouted out the slogan of never increasing taxes, the people under Yang Xie could be at peace. Because this meant that in the future, Yang Qindong's descendants would also have to respect this decision. This sentence would also become a rule that would be enforced forever. In other words, this could become an ancestral rule of Yang Xie. In Yang Xie, Yang Qindong was equivalent to an ancestor. This was the difference between him and the ruler of a city. This was also one of the important reasons why in Yang Xie's territory, any policy could be implemented smoothly. For example, whether it was the southern Ming or Baiming, if they wanted to make a new policy, they would have to bring benefits to the nobles and the country gentry. Once the new policy harmed the interests of the other party, it would inevitably be met with great resistance. This was also the reason why, apart from Shang Yang's reform, the other reforms had all failed. Their actions harmed the interests of some people, so naturally, there would be many people who opposed it. It could be said that it was extremely difficult to implement it. This was also why the Great Ming had no lack of insightful people, but many good policies could not be implemented. However, in Yang Qindong's case, this was not a problem. He was the ancestor of Yang Xie. Whether it was the local government or the military, he was the core. In addition, under the efforts of Yang Xie's propaganda department, he had long become a legend. Every word of such a person was like the truth. Who would dare to stop him? Who would be able to stop him? It was just like never increasing taxes. Perhaps if it was someone else who did it, they would have to face all kinds of problems. However, this did not happen to Yang Qindong. Yu Qian had seen the key point, which was why he was so excited. Yang Qindong was also very happy. He was happy to receive Yu Qian's praise. With his support, this work was much easier to do. All right, Mr. Yu, this matter is settled. Later, draft the work in this king's name. Also, please consider the price of food. The standard cannot be too high nor too low. In short, the interests of the people must be the priority. Yang Qindong knew that it was time to leave. Presumably, the news of his return to Crimson City had already spread. His wives in the palace must be very anxious, especially his 2 children. He missed them very much. After not seeing them for 2 years, he did not know how tall they had grown. In the end, Yang Qindong still left the city lord's mansion. Then the group of people went straight to the palace. This time they did not ride a horse. Instead, they sat in a carriage. Considering the problem of hygiene in the city, unless the situation was urgent, no one was allowed to casually ride a horse on the streets. In the carriage with rubber tires and shock absorbers, Yang Qindong sat on the comfortable sofa, feeling very comfortable. Looking out the window made of glass and watching the beautiful scenery flash before his eyes, he felt a little excited. Chapter 1356. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was homesick. His wife and children were in the palace. In some ways this was his home. At the entrance of the palace, There was a line of children wearing special military uniforms standing in a row. They held wooden swords in their hands and were dressed in military uniforms. From afar they looked like they were standing in a neat row. Princess Yang Jie, who was already 5 years old, was standing at the front of the line. She wore a female military uniform with her head held high and her chest puffed out. Wearing a small beret, she looked like a female general and was very eye-catching. Beside Yang Jie stood Yang Bo, who was less than 3 years old. As Yang Qindong's eldest son, he was likely to inherit the throne in the future. At this time he was also wearing a special military uniform. Because of the rich nutrition he gave off a strong and dignified feeling. The only difference between him and his sister was that he seemed to be unable to stand still. His eyes would occasionally look at the road in the distance as if he was waiting for something. The heir and princess came out together. The only person who could make them wait was naturally their father, Yang Qindong. Yang Bo didn't have much of an impression of Yang Qindong. After all, his father left him when he was very young. Most of his impressions of Yang Qindong came from the mouths of others. From the mouths of others, his father seemed to be omnipotent and capable of anything. Children all worship heroes. Yang Bowie was extremely proud to have such a father. Every time he heard others talk about his father, he would involuntarily puff out his chest. It was as if he was saying to others, "Come, praise my father. I am his eldest son." Under his pride, Yang Bo had more than once thought about what he would look like when he saw his father and how he would perform. But when he really saw Yang Qindong he became a little afraid. He didn't know if his father would like him. If he didn't, then what would he do? Don't look around. Father will come back at any time. You have to perform well. Yang Jie whispered when she noticed her brother's absent-minded look. Okay. Yang Bo nodded in agreement. But this was only because his sister was usually too dignified. In fact, his worries did not disappear. Instead, he took the opportunity to ask softly, "Sister, do you think Imperial Father will like me?" "Yes, we are all Father's good children. Anyway, Father used to like me very much. I think he will like you too." Of course, little Yang Jie didn't dare to be too sure, so she had to use herself as an example. Little Yang Bo nodded his head again and replied in a half-understanding manner. The group of children was still waiting quietly. Those who could enter this team were not children of ordinary families. For example, there were Tiger's Mane's son and daughter, Beta Persei's son, Yang San's son and daughter, and so on. There were also people like Yu Mian's son, who was also Yu Chen's grandson. Their loyalty was unquestionable and they would grow up together. It could be imagined that these people would most likely become Yang Bo's people in the future, and they would also be the most trustworthy group of people. They were still waiting. After lunch, the team began to gather here. In the words of little Yang Jie, who was the leader of the children, they wanted to welcome Imperial Father in their best state. They wanted him to see that although they were very young, they could also protect their home like adults and become great talents. Little Yang Jie even publicly said more than once that she wanted to be a female general in the future, lead troops to war and expand Yangtze's territory. Under the guidance of little Yang Jie, these little friends also had the same idea. They were also fantasizing about one day riding a warhorse and killing in all directions, becoming heroes. The waiting time always felt very long. Fortunately, Yang Qindong's carriage finally appeared. From afar, when a group of carriages came towards the palace and the guards near the palace stood upright and saluted, the children knew that it must be Bugnam of Gojoseon. Sitting in the carriage, Yang Qindong saw the scene of children standing in a row in front of the palace through the transparent glass from afar. At this moment, Yang Wu, who was in charge of welcoming Yang Qindong, sat beside him. "Young master, it's the princess and the prince. They are standing in line to welcome the arrival of the young master." Upon hearing that his daughter and son were in the group, Yang Qindong let go of all his reservations and said loudly, "Isn't this nonsense? It's still very hot at noon today. Who told them to stand here and wait for me? Hurry, speed up, let's hurry over." After the coachman received the order, he immediately cracked the whip and moved forward. Amidst the cracking of the whip, the speed of the carriage increased by a lot. In just a moment they arrived at the gate of the palace. Then the carriage stopped and a somewhat anxious figure walked out. Who else could it be but Yang Qindong? With a golden cloak on his body, Yang Qindong became the center of everyone's attention the moment he appeared. As soon as he got down from the carriage he walked straight to the girl in front of the line, little Yang Jie. Yang Qindong gently picked up little Yang Jie and spun her around in his arms. Immediately, giggles could be heard. Little Yang Jie said without any feeling of unfamiliarity, "Father, spin faster, faster." This was one of the games that Yang Jie was most willing to play when she was very young. She was also naturally bold and did not have the slightest fear of heights. Not only was she not afraid, but she was also very happy to play. Yang Qindong had been constantly training these past few years, and his strength had already reached the master realm. He did not know why he was tired, but he spun faster and faster. The two of them, one adult and one child, laughed continuously, attracting the attention of more people. At the same time, many people's faces revealed knowing smiles. After an unknown amount of time, a seemingly anxious voice sounded, "Father, the child also wants." Needless to say, the person who said this must be little Yang Bo. Only then did Yang Qindong lower his head to pay attention to his son, whose head only reached his knees. Regarding this son, Yang Qindong's impression of him was that he was still an infant drinking milk. However, he did not expect that after 2 years he had grown so much. At that moment, his body only paused for a moment, then he reached out with his left hand to grab Yang Bo's body, and continued to spin with one hand each. With Yang Bo's little weight, it was naturally not in Yang Qindong's eyes. To him, there was no difference whether he spun 1 or 2. On the other hand, Yang Bo was suddenly grabbed and spun in the air. He was really uncomfortable, and the tender flesh on his face even piled up because of this, as if he was about to cry at any time. A real man should not be afraid of anything. Even if you bleed, you should not cry. Bo, you are the first real man of our Yang family's next generation. Even more so, you should not cry casually, understand? Yang Qindong noticed the change in Yang Bo's expression and opened his mouth to speak. This was the first time Yang Qindong had spoken in Yang Bo's memory. It could also be called the first time he had taught him. Yang Bo heard it particularly clearly. Although with his little brain he did not quite understand the meaning of a real man, but when he saw his father's serious expression, he instinctively nodded. This child understands. I'm a real man, I will not cry. Ah, good son. Yang Bo's performance made Yang Qindong very happy. At the same time, he praised him and spun even faster. After a while, the laughter of the father and son trio could be heard. Yang Qindong naturally knew the principle of going too far is as bad as falling short. After seeing the hot sweat on the heads of the daughter and son, Yang Qindong gently put them down, and with one hand in each hand, he strode into the palace. The main gate of the palace was already open. Usually this gate would not be opened easily. Only when Hu Yen, as the first consort, went out would the gate be opened. Of course, Yang Qindong also had to follow this etiquette and treatment when he went in and out, but because he was often not at home, the gate was rarely opened for him. Now that Yang Qindong had returned, the real master had returned, the gate naturally had to be opened. In the palace square not far behind the gate, Hu Yen and the other 8 women were already waiting there with a group of maids. Yang Qindong now had 8 wives. Except for Hu Yen, who was the first consort, the others were all side consorts. Usually when Yang Qindong was not around, Hu Yen was in charge. Although the number of people was not small, they got along well. This was not only because Hu Yen had the ability to command, but also because these women could clearly see their own positions. Second, Madame Qiao Yin was born as a maid. Although she had followed Yang Qindong for the longest time, she had a sense of propriety when doing things, and she was very clear about who gave her everything. In her eyes, not only was Yang Qindong her master, Hu Yen was also her master, so she was naturally very obedient. Third, Madame Xiao Yuxue, and fourth, Madame Dong Xiangxiang. Both of them were of noble birth. If it were not for Yang Qindong's appearance, they would probably still be a concubine. Their living environment since young had long taught them who they could provoke and what they could not do. Facing the first consort, Hu Yen, who was a descendant of a famous family, they naturally respected her and did not dare to have any second thoughts. In the eyes of the two, it was already very fortunate that they were not disliked by Hu Yen. Fifth, Madame Tuoya, although her background was not bad, the various clans were now led by the Han. Just based on this point, she had fallen far behind. After coming to the palace, there were many things that she had to learn. It was already very fortunate that Hu Yen did not pick on her, so how would she dare to pick on her? Sixth, Madame Wan Xiaoyu. She had suffered since young, and Yang Qindong's arrival changed her and her family's lives. In her eyes, Yang Qindong was her benefactor, and so was Hu Yen. Naturally, there was nothing that she would not listen to and obey. Seventh, Madame Su Man. Although she was also a descendant of an official, she had declined after all, and when she first came, she had the idea of assassinating Yang Qindong. It could be said that she was someone who had made a big mistake. It was already a blessing that she was not punished for it, so how would she dare to act recklessly? Chapter 1357. 8th, Madame Junko was just a princess of a destroyed country. Moreover, she had lived in Yang village for many years and had lived under the influence of Hu Yen for many years. She had long known what could be done and what could not be done. Naturally, she was very obedient. The madams were all sensible people, and Hu Yen was also a reasonable woman. She never used her status to pressure others. In such a big environment, everyone was naturally good. Not to mention that Yang Qindong had also expressed that his wife did not need to be beautiful, virtuous, or noble. There was only one requirement, and that was that they must be sensible. Otherwise, they would not be fated to be together. If they were not fated to be together, it meant a lot of things. No one dared to make wild guesses. Once they were forced to leave the palace because of immorality, their life would be completely ruined. Although Yang Qindong gave people the feeling that he was very nostalgic, there were some things that could not be challenged lightly. No one could bear the consequences. Under various reasons and circumstances, the atmosphere in the palace was very harmonious. At least, Yang Qindong's important matters had never been delayed because of the harem. He was very satisfied with this point. Holding the small hands of his daughter and son, Yang Qindong immediately quickened his pace when he saw the 8 madams standing in the square waiting for him. He walked toward Hu Yen in the middle of the crowd. Yang Qindong returned to Qixing City. This news did not take long for the whole city to know. Then his figure continued to appear in various places. The munitions factory was the cornerstone of the development of the Yang faction. Accompanied by the chief engineer, Feng Ku, who was also his disciple, Yang Qindong inspected many places for 3 days in a row. He also provided a lot of valuable experience. If one wanted to create a firearm, the raw material had to be qualified first. The iron of ancient times did not meet the requirements. The finished firearms that were created would mostly explode. How to make steel, how to press satin, how to build lathes, the level of technical skills and so on had to complement each other. Fortunately, after years of hard work, there was already a set of effective standards. Yang Qindong didn't know much about these things, but there were many books in the warehouse. When they were taken out and placed in the hands of smart people, they would be able to make use of their advantages. Thus, according to the books, they would be able to create more suitable firearms. The Type 95 rocket launchers, grenades, bullets, and artillery shells had already been formed. Now, the materials were being turned into finished products. There would be more machine tools and more firearms that Yang Qindong knew would be manufactured. Although it would be a long process, Yang Qindong knew that more haste, less speed. He did not ask Feng Ku to speed up the research. What he needed was a safe and stable development. Remember, every weapon you make has to be up to standard. When the soldiers are fighting at the front lines, they are fighting with their lives on the line. If the weapon is not up to standard, then there will be huge problems. Yang Qindong was in the large conference room of the munitions factory. He had a serious face as he spoke to Feng Ku and the other higher-ups of the munitions factory. The people below were all holding pens and recording with their heads lowered. Occasionally, when they looked up and saw Yang Qindong talking, they all had expressions of admiration and conviction on their faces. In the entire Yangxia, Yang Qindong was the undisputed leader. In the eyes of many people, he was an omnipotent existence. It was also because of his appearance that everyone was able to live a good life that they didn't even dare to imagine before. Because of this, no one in the Yangxia disobeyed his words, and no one didn't believe him. For firearms and weapons that can be produced and used normally, we can add more lathes to ensure quality and quantity. As for how much money you need in this regard, you can apply to Mr. Yu. In this regard, the city lord's mansion will also vigorously support. As he spoke, Yang Qindong nodded lightly to Yu Qian, who was sitting at the side. Yu Qian had been forcibly dragged to the munitions factory by Yang Qindong to participate in this meeting. Ever since he saw that Yu Qian had lost a lot of weight, Yang Qindong decisively gave the order that in the future, Yu Qian's job would be to take care of himself and listen as a supplement. What kind of person was Yu Qian and how upright he was, the history books had already given the answer. This person was also a person who could see the big picture. This was very rare. It must be said that Yang Xie didn't lack talents. After all, there were so many places for people to display their talents. As long as people were willing to work hard, there was a ready-made platform, and there was no need to be afraid of no results. But among these people, there were still too few who could see the big picture. Perhaps they were loyal enough, but their brains weren't flexible enough. Or perhaps they were clever enough, but they had too many tricks up their sleeves. These kinds of people weren't very useful. Who knew when they would cause a big mess? There were also some people who were steady enough, but they were too inflexible. This wasn't suitable for the rapidly developing Yang faction. In comparison, there were too few leaders like Yu Qian, who had a strength of character, was very calm, and could change according to the situation. Before a suitable replacement was found, Yu Qian's body naturally needed extra attention. Yang Chendong gave the order that in the future, he didn't need to worry about small things. He only needed to take care of the big things. So he brought Yu Qian with him wherever he went. While letting him relax, he also tried to change his way of working and his body's condition. In fact, Yang Chendong had already changed Yu Qian's life. If he hadn't appeared, Yu Qian would have been dead for more than 2 years. Yu Qian carefully listened to Yang Chendong's instructions to the munitions factory, nodding from time to time. In the past, it wasn't that he didn't pay attention to the munitions factory. It was just that he didn't understand the rules here. Usually he only saw some words written on paper and then some instructions on how to transfer money. Now that he was following Yang Chendong, he had a more intuitive understanding of the situation here. Of course, he knew the importance of the munitions factory. He immediately nodded. "King, don't worry." Unknowingly, Yu Qian also finally changed the way he addressed Yang Chendong. Just the word "king" was enough to prove that he recognized the other party in his heart. Speaking of which, people like Yu Qian had a very strong sense of loyalty to the king. Although the ancients often said that water could carry a boat, it could also sink a boat. They also often said that the people were the foundation of the country. But how many people could really do that? Even the previous Yu Qian couldn't do it. When there was a conflict between the king and the people, he would still consider things from the king's side. But now, after seeing Yang Chendong's actions, seeing the Han people living under the Yangxie's rule, and seeing how the Han people's lives were much better than before, and how the Han people were beginning to show their value, bringing all kinds of benefits to the Yangxie, he finally understood. The people. Just how powerful was the people. He finally understood what it meant to be a true citizen. He also finally understood that the people he served before were only the scholar officials and country gentry. He also finally understood that he had taken many leaders before. Only the people at the bottom could represent the will of the people. As long as they lived well, the entire Yang faction would have unimaginable power. In other words, when Yang Chendong worked for the people, he was also working for himself. While creating good living conditions for the people, he was also paving the way for himself to achieve his goals and desires. When he really put the people first, his position became more and more stable, and the Yangxie's development also became more and more powerful. If one looked carefully at the development of the Yangxie, how could it not be a process of reform? Since ancient times, there were actually many so-called reforms. The famous ones were Wang Engshi's reform and the Wuxia reform, and the less famous ones were unknown. The only one that was successful was Shang Yang's reform. Why was that? It was because the reform was like cutting meat from the big clans, and it was like snatching food from the hands of the people who benefited from it. They had to face the obstruction of these powerful people. It was easy to imagine how difficult it was to succeed. Even with the support of the king, it was difficult to succeed. But looking at the development of the Yangxie, there was no such difficulty. First of all, the development of the Yangxie did not need the support of the big clans. Not only that, every time they occupied a piece of land, whether it was the local rich clans or the country gentry, they would become the first targets to be dealt with. Half of their family property would be confiscated, and then the whole clan would be divided into countless branches and moved to a foreign place. This made it impossible for them to work together to do anything that displeased the Yangxie. Second of all, with the help of Yang Chendong's various advanced ideas, Yangxie did not lack money. All he needed was people. He did not need the support of the big clans. As long as the people approved of him, he would be able to develop better. Third of all, from the beginning of the development of the Yangxie, he paid attention to fairness and justice. He paid attention to treating everyone equally. Because the guiding ideology played an important role, it changed the understanding of the people. This also greatly weakened the influence of the big clans. Fourth of all, Yang Chendong was a pioneer. He had the ability to keep his word. It could be said that as long as he did not make any mistakes, the development of the Yangxie would not have any problems. At the same time, he did not need to rely on anyone's strength. The big clans could not display their strength even if they wanted to. In short, the big clans did not have the opportunity to perform. They did not have the power, so all the changes could be carried out as they wished. No one could stop them. After leaving the ordnance factory, Yang Chendong, Yu Qian, and the others went to the secret tank base under the accompaniment of Feng Ku. They took out a total of 5 tanks from the warehouse and parked them there. One of them had been dismantled into countless pieces and became various small parts. The creation of a tank was a gradual process. It was not something that could be created just by saying that it could be created. Key components such as the engine were even more of a headache. Even Feng Ku, who was regarded as a once-in-a-century genius and had great talent, was helpless. Therefore he used the stupidest method, which was to imitate. Chapter 1358. Following suit, he dismantled each component and memorized their locations. Then they copied them one by one and finally pieced them together to create a new tank. In fact, after 2 years of hard work, most of the parts have been created. The polished parts were no different from the original parts. There were no problems with the style or specifications. However, when it came to some core technologies, they were unable to do it. Looking at the various parts on the ground and the number of engineers standing in the room, Yang Qindong knew that these people were working very hard. But even so, Yang Qindong wasn't optimistic about them. The difficulty of building a tank wasn't limited to the engine, but more importantly, the tank cannons that allowed the tank to unleash its power. Tank cannons were mainly cannons. High chamber pressure, long barrel, fast initial velocity, high abrasion, high precision requirements, and high metal smelting, processing technology, and design standards of a country were all very high. Also, it was important to note that cannons required cannons and cannons. The manufacturing of various cannons and cannons also required a lot of knowledge. However, these were not things that the current young weapon crafting stone could overcome. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a saying in the future. The number of countries that mastered tank cannon technology was less than the number of countries that mastered atomic bomb technology. From this point of view, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that tank cannons were harder to build than atomic bombs. But it didn't mean that it was hard. The research process couldn't be stopped. Otherwise, there would never be a day of success. Yang Qindong didn't mean to dispel everyone's enthusiasm. He just said to Feng Ku, the difficulty of building a tank is very high. There are also many problems that need to be solved. Don't think about becoming a fatty in one bite. It's better to do it step by step. Listening to Yang Qindong's guidance, Feng Ku also said with a serious face, "Yes, teacher, you're right. We're doing the same. Now we're researching a small engine. If we succeed, we can build a vehicle." When the word vehicle was mentioned, Feng Ku's face was also full of excitement. When he first heard this word, he was so shocked. Even now, thinking about it still made his blood boil. Yes, you're right. But building an engine isn't something that can be done overnight. Before that, we can build something else, such as a steam engine. Yang Qindong didn't plan to spoil things by rushing them. He still decided to follow the path of history. Steam engine? A thoughtful look flashed across Feng Ku's face. Previously, he had received a book about the steam engine from Yang Qindong and had studied it for a while. However, ever since he saw the engine, he put it aside. In his opinion, since there was already something more advanced, of course he should use it. That's right, the steam engine. That thing doesn't require much core technology, and with the current strength of the ordnance factory, it's possible to research it. In the future we will build a large number of railway tracks. Let's start with Vietnam and Laos. When the time comes, we will build railways that extend in all directions. This way, whether it is the mobilization of troops or the transportation of goods, it will be greatly improved. At this time, Yang Qindong had already begun to imagine the appearance of a train with thick smoke running amok in his territory. It must be very spectacular. In this way, the transportation under his rule would be greatly improved. In the future, no matter where he went, not only would it greatly shorten the time, even if there was a problem, reinforcements would also arrive in the shortest time possible. It would also play a great role in promoting the security and stability of the forces and the allocation of goods. This was no longer a discussion but an order. Feng Ku also knew that he was too anxious for success, so he nodded heavily. Yes, teacher, this student will immediately adjust the direction of the research. Yang Qindong was also very satisfied with Feng Ku's performance, but he didn't want to dampen his enthusiasm. After thinking for a while, he said, "How about this? The engineers who are researching the engine don't have to stop. I will get some small engines for you to use later." As he said this, Yang Qindong sighed in his heart. It's time to get some vehicles used by the army. Not only were there weapons and ammunition in the warehouse, there were also quite a few vehicles. There were even some very old military three-wheeled motorcycles. Relatively speaking, their manufacturing was simpler, and the structure of the engine was easier to imitate. It was suitable for the engineers to study. As for how to explain the appearance of these things, even tanks had appeared, so was there a need to be afraid that they wouldn't be able to explain it clearly? Small engines? Hearing this, Feng Ku's eyes lit up. He seemed to have thought of something and couldn't help but ask in excitement, "Teacher, did you find something in the mountains?" Previously, in order to explain how the tanks and weapons and ammunition appeared, Yang Qindong had told Feng Ku and the others that they were all found in a mysterious mountain. After Yang Qindong had already told the students that this world didn't exist independently, and that it was likely that there were other high-tech civilizations, the students were no longer unfamiliar with the term UFO. The latter explanation was that these things found in the mountains were very likely products of other worlds, but they were accidentally forgotten in a certain mountain. Although it sounded ridiculous, at least it was an explanation. What was more important was that Feng Ku and the others believed him, which saved Yang Qindong a lot of time and effort. And just 3 days after the inspection of the munitions factory, more than a dozen military 3-wheeled motorcycles, 4-wheeled cars, and trucks appeared in the most heavily guarded tank test area of the munitions factory. Of course, these were all done in secret and outsiders didn't know about it. Yang Qindong had long focused on other aspects. Under the company of Governor Yu Qian, they walked around the other factories for the past few days. At this time, other than the fact that there were no cars on the streets, Qian City was no different from a city during the Republic of China. Walking on the wide road, all kinds of carriages and rickshaws could be seen everywhere. On both sides of the road, all kinds of shops had sprung up like bamboo shoots after the rain. For example, there were clothing stores, department stores, food stores, theaters, and hotels. They had everything that one could think of. Compared to the restaurants, inns, and silk shops of the outside world, it was like heaven and earth. Once an outsider entered here, it was like Granny Lu entering the Grand View Garden. Their eyes were not enough to take in everything. Among these outsiders was the Spanish merchant, also known as François Garcia. As the Kingdom of Spain was very developed in the maritime industry, when the sea route was continuously opened up by them, a large number of adventurous merchants set up fleets and began to travel everywhere. One after another, they discovered unfamiliar places and made a lot of money. Whenever these sea merchants appeared in a place, if they were strong and their opponents were weak, they would directly destroy and plunder them. If their opponents were strong, they would lower their noble heads and trade with them. While reaping huge profits, they would also think of ways to exploit your strengths and find your weaknesses to give you a fatal blow. Rather than saying that they were adventurers and merchants, it was more accurate to say that they were pirates of the sea. Garcia was one of the pirates. When the other merchants were still targeting the Western world, he had already braved the wind and waves to the east. Fortunately, he appeared in Qian City. After stating that he was a merchant of the Kingdom of Spain, he was allowed to enter the port and come to Qian City. Just like how the Western countries wanted to understand the Eastern world, Yang Xie's Navy Department also wanted to know about the outside world. After a few years of preparation, they didn't know how many ships they had sent, and they completely understood the terrain of the nearby seas. Now they were stretching out even further. The arrival of merchants like Garcia was also welcomed by the Navy Department. Their arrival often brought a lot of information that they didn't know about. In this way they could easily obtain more knowledge. After being welcomed by Yang Xie's Navy, Garcia stepped into Qian City and his eyes were dazzled. Along the way from Spain, apart from a limited number of places, most of the areas gave him the impression that they were very poor. Apart from some nobles who were still living well, the ordinary people were too poor. He even saw a lot of cannibalism. In some places he often only needed to pay the price of a meal to get the local people to do anything for him. After a long time, this feeling gave Garcia a sense of superiority. In his heart, although the world was very big, no one could be stronger than the Kingdom of Spain. Oh, maybe the Kingdom of England was also not bad, but their strength was only about the same. In this era, in the West, England and Spain were indeed the strongest. As for the other countries, they were either very weak or had yet to become independent. What's more, Xiaomei was not even born yet. With this kind of arrogance, Garcia thought that he was better than others, and looked at everyone as if they were country bumpkins. When he came to Qian City he was really shocked. If he didn't see it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have imagined that there was such a strong country on the other side of the sea. There was a straight and wide road here, a clean and hygienic environment here, a street lamp that was as bright as the sun here, a skyscraper that he had to raise his head to see the roof of the building here. In short, there were too many beautiful scenery here that he couldn't imagine before. More importantly, the economy here was very developed, and there were many things that he couldn't imagine. Chapter 1359. There were all kinds of luxurious clothes and silky fabrics that he had never seen before. There were all kinds of delicious food and drinks that he had never seen before. There was even wine that was unique to the West and had never been seen in the East. Living in a high-rise building with electric lights, with elevators that could be used to go up and down. It was beyond his imagination. Bicycles were everywhere, vans and carriages could be seen everywhere. What's more, it was very comfortable to sit on them, there wasn't any bumps at all. It was much more comfortable than the carriages of the nobles and even the royal family. Garcia was surprised, but at the same time, the ambition in his heart was ignited. He was thinking, if these good things were introduced to Spain, how much wealth would it bring him? With this goal in mind, he continued to work hard to achieve it. When the Navy sent someone to contact him, he was very enthusiastic, giving the impression that he knew everything, but only he knew what was true and what was false. While gaining the friendship of the Navy, he also used the gold and silver he brought with him to go shopping in Resin City. At this time, the porcelain, tea, and silk that were praised by the West were no longer his goal. In his opinion, although these things were precious, as long as he had money, they could be bought. What he wanted the most now was something that only Resin City had, something that didn't exist in the outside world. For example, high-quality firearms and artillery that didn't seem to be large in size, but could exert great power. Naturally, it would be extremely difficult to take away such things. What he wanted was not the finished product, but the manufacturing blueprints. With these things, if he had enough raw materials, he didn't know how many finished products he could make. Recently, railed vehicles began to appear in Resin City, which made Garcia's eyes light up. He sent his most capable assistant, Anthony, to find a way to get the blueprints of the railed vehicles, and then he was ready to leave. After a few days of hard work, he had already obtained a bicycle, a military telescope, and the blueprints for a rocket launcher. With just these, he believed that he would be able to sell them for a sky-high price when he returned to his country. Then he would think of a way to come back again. At that time, with enough gold and silver, his goal would be even greater. Sooner or later he would take away all the good things in Crimson City. Then he would use this spear to attack the shield. At that time, it would be possible for him to become the Crimson City Lord. This was a great goal. Although it was difficult, Garcia was determined to do his best to achieve it. He was also looking forward to that day. It was located in a roadside coffee shop, which was also a new thing recently. Because of the elegant environment, it gradually replaced some tea houses and became a new place that many fashionable people were willing to visit. Garcia chose a corner that few people paid attention to. From here he could easily see everything that happened in the coffee shop, but it was difficult for others to notice him. After drinking a cup of coffee, he was still savoring the aroma in his mouth. Suddenly, the door of the coffee shop opened, and the tall, fair-skinned assistant, Anthony, appeared. Accompanying him was a middle-aged man wearing a traditional Chinese suit. He wasn't tall, but he already had a big belly. When the person entered the cafe, he had an arrogant look on his face. After looking around and spotting Garcia in the corner, he strode over with his feet splayed outwards. When he walked, he purposely put his hands behind his back. Fortunately, there were no other customers in the coffee shop at this time. Otherwise, it would be easy to recognize him as an official. The fat middle-aged man was indeed an official, and his position wasn't low. He was the director of the Commerce Department's External Relations Department, Lu Qing. When Garcia first came here, he was the first person he interacted with. His face was full of fat, and his small eyes were filled with greed. It was also because of his appearance that Garcia, who had met countless people along the way, gave him his first sum of money. After that, he received good treatment. For example, his accommodation was arranged by Lu Qing. Although he had to pay a hefty sum of money, it was very comfortable. Not only were there electric lights, but there was also 24-hour hot water and a comfortable sofa. It was almost unimaginable outside of Resin City. Garcia later asked around and found out that not all foreign businessmen could enjoy such treatment. Some of them had electric lights, but they didn't have 24-hour hot water or a sofa. Based on this, he knew that the money was worth it. As a result, he continued to send money to Lu Qing. After the two of them became familiar with each other, he got a lot of things that he wanted. When Garcia saw Lu Qing sitting down in front of him, a flattering smile appeared on his face. Then he said in broken Chinese, "Director Lu, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. Alright, you know I'm busy, so you don't have to be so courteous. Why don't you tell me what you want me to do here?" Lu Qing said impatiently. Garcia, who had interacted with him many times, was confident that he knew Lu Qing very well. This person was a greedy person who only cared about money. As long as the money was given, everything would be fine. Otherwise, he would immediately turn hostile. With a smile on his face, he gently took out a piece of banknote with the number 1000 written on it and placed it on the table. As soon as the banknote was taken out, Lu Qing's impatient expression immediately became much better. He first looked around, and when he found that no one was paying attention to him, he chuckled and put the 1000 taels banknote into his pocket. Then his tone became much friendlier. "Look, we are all old friends, how can I be so shameless?" Lu Qing took the banknote and Garcia's expression became much happier. "Yes, I'm friends with Director Lu, so I need your help." Garcia leaned forward and whispered something in Lu Qing's ear. Lu Qing, who originally had a smile on his face, quickly changed his expression. His brows furrowed together before he shook his head and said, "That thing isn't easy to obtain." "Yes, I know it's not easy, but what kind of person is Director Liu? There's nothing in Crimson City that can stop you. How about this, get the blueprint and I'll pay you this much," Garcia said and extended a finger. This finger was not 1,000 taels, nor was it 10,000 taels but 100,000 taels. Seeing this, Lu Qing was stunned at first, but he quickly shook his head. "No, this is a serious matter. The blueprints of the railroad tracks are not so easy to obtain. In the middle, many people will be needed. This bit of silver is not enough." Garcia cursed Lu Qing's insatiable greed in his heart. However, when he thought of the value of this item and the benefits he would receive if he were to offer it to the King of Spain, he hardened his heart and extended another finger. "That's all. I don't have much left from the silver I brought this time." With the price of 200,000 taels, Lu Qing finally smiled. Sure. 3 days. We'll make the deal here 3 days later." "Okay." Garcia also knew that this item wasn't easy to get. It was all because of Lu Qing's ability that he could get it done in 3 days. Therefore he happily nodded. Lu Qing left without even drinking a cup of coffee. To him, the coffee in this coffee shop wasn't bad, but it paled in comparison to the free coffee from the Department of Commerce. Not long after, Garcia and Anthony also left. Right after they left, the male waiter who was dozing off in the coffee shop suddenly opened his eyes. He immediately asked for leave from another waiter and strode out. No one knew that this waiter had another identity. He was an intelligence officer from the Security Bureau. His job as a waiter in the coffee shop was just a cover for his identity. After all, this was a high-class public place. There might be some private transactions happening here, so it was necessary to arrange for someone to be here. After leaving the coffee shop, this intelligence officer quickly went to the nearest intelligence station. He met with his team leader, Gucci, and told him about his findings and suspicions. From a certain point of view, the Security Bureau and the Central Intelligence Bureau were both part of the Yangtze's intelligence department. They were like the Great Ming's Imperial Guards and the Eastern Palace Guards. They had the responsibility of secretly monitoring hundreds of officials. Once they suspected someone, they could often arrest them without any evidence. They had a lot of power. After hearing his team members' report, Gucci didn't dare to be careless. This matter involved a director of the Department of Commerce, and there were even foreign businessmen involved. If he didn't handle it well, it would have a deep impact. The scope of this matter had exceeded his authority, so he had to report it. At first, Gucci found the deputy director, Dong Hui. Then this matter was reported to Che Chao, the director of the Security Bureau in Chichen City. Looking at the latest information on the desk, Che Chao waved his hand at Dong Hui and said, "I understand. Do what you need to do." Dong Hui knew that he had caught a big fish. He immediately retreated with a happy face. When there was no one in the office, Che Chao placed his hands in front of the telegraph on the table. After switching to a signal station, he began to report to the other side. The wired telephone was still being developed in the Academy of Sciences. It was said that it was about to succeed. Before this, the main leaders of the various departments used this simple transmitter to communicate. Although it was a bit troublesome, it was still much easier than walking out of the office to the destination. Chapter 1360. After Dong Hui left the director's office, he looked for Gucci and asked him to arrange for someone to follow Lu Qing. He needed to know what she had done in the past 24 hours, including what she had eaten and how many hours she had slept. He also needed to have a detailed tracking record. Gucci knew that it was time for him to perform a meritorious service. He immediately went out and called for a group of more than 10 people to follow and monitor Lu Qing. However, what made him a little disappointed was that Lu Qing's performance was very normal in these 3 days. Other than working normally in the department and reporting to Minister Chang Qianhao alone, he didn't have any contact with anyone else. Even when he was working, he was accompanied by his secretary. He rarely had any contact with anyone alone. Gucci was puzzled. Did he find out that he had sent someone to follow him? 3 days later, when he saw Lu Qing walk out of the Commerce Department and walk towards the coffee house at the designated time, he knew that he was not found out. However, something must have been overlooked. The informant was still lurking in the coffee house, but this time, Garcia was obviously on guard. His deputy, Anthony, actually stood up and blocked the informant's line of sight. In just a short while, Lu Qing had already left. As for what he had done with Garcia, what they had said, and even if they had traded anything, Garcia had no idea. The difference between the Security Bureau and the Daming East factory was that they couldn't arrest people without evidence. This was Yang Qindong's order. Obviously he was also worried about making some unjust or false cases. After all, people still had to rely on people to do things and people were selfish. He didn't want this department to be used by others to deal with their opponents. Without enough evidence, the informant did not send out the signal to take action in the coffee house. After Lu Qing, Garcia, and Anthony walked out of the coffee house, Gucci, who had been waiting outside, finally could not wait any longer. He entered the coffee house to understand the situation. After learning that he did not see whether the other party had traded anything, Gucci was in a dilemma. After all, this matter involved a director of the Commerce Department and a foreign businessman. If he acted rashly and made a mistake, the impact would be too bad. Following Yang Qindong's order, after the opening of Chichen City's port, more and more merchants came to Chichen City. Most of them were yellow-skinned, but there were also some white-skinned and black-skinned people. When these people arrived at Crimson City, they were first shocked by the prosperity of this place. Then they felt a great business opportunity and spent money to purchase goods from Crimson City. At the same time, they also transported some of the ores that Crimson City needed. It was precisely because of the appearance of these sea merchants that the five-star army needed for weapons and materials. Just based on this point, without any evidence, these merchants couldn't be casually arrested. If these people were all scared away, it would be a huge loss to Crimson City and Yangxia. Gucci, who couldn't make up his mind, didn't know what to do. Just as he was wondering if he should take another look, he received a piece of news that made him unable to sit still. Garcia had actually applied to leave the port with his fleet a day later, and it had been approved. Damn it, he's trying to escape. At this time, how could Gucci not see that Garcia was trying to escape? Now, it wasn't a matter of whether or not he had evidence. It was a matter of principle to prevent people from taking confidential information out of Chichen City. If Garcia wanted to leave, he would definitely take away all the important things. That would be the best time to catch him red-handed. Without any hesitation, Gucci went straight to where his superior, Dong Hui, was at. Dong Hui also felt that this matter was very serious. After quickly consulting with Director Che Chao, he mobilized over 100 intelligence agents and decided to go to the port tomorrow morning. At the same time, he ordered Gucci to arrest Director Lu Qing at the same time tomorrow. However, because there wasn't enough evidence, it was best not to arrest someone in a public place like the office. Garcia didn't know that he was being targeted. He had successfully obtained the construction information of the railcar. Looking at the various neatly drawn numbers on it, he let out a long sigh of relief. With this item, this trip was worth it. With a smile on his face, Garcia could be said to be asking questions. He looked at his assistant Anthony and asked, "Have you informed the port?" "Yes, we have. Tomorrow morning, our ship will depart from the port and return to our country," Anthony replied respectfully. In their country, the difference in status between people was a huge gap. Even if the superior wanted you to die, you had to obey. "Very good. How about this, Anthony? You stay here tomorrow. Don't go back with me. Stay here and continue to keep an eye on this place. I feel that there should be a lot of secrets that we haven't unearthed yet. This important mission will be handed to you. I hope that the next time I come back here, I will hear more good news," Garcia said with a hopeful tone. Anthony didn't think about being left behind. When he heard this, his face was naturally filled with shock. However, when he understood the benefits, his face naturally revealed a joyful expression. He was only Garcia's assistant, and there wasn't much credit left for him, unless others were willing to share some of it with him. But no matter what, when there was a great contribution, people would only remember Garcia. How many people would remember him? If he could stay behind to carry out the mission alone, it would be different. The merit wouldn't be snatched away by others. Not to mention, this was Garcia's idea. He had to carry it out even if he didn't want to. "Yes, I'm willing to stay." "Very good. There are still some silver tails left for you. Go ahead and do it." Garcia patted Anthony's shoulder happily and said with a face full of excitement. The Intelligence Bureau finished setting up the surveillance very quickly. The reason why they didn't take action immediately was because they were afraid that if they acted too early, they would startle the opponent and lose the evidence they wanted. Therefore, when they all boarded the ship and were about to leave, it was the best time to take action. The next morning, Dong Hui brought over 100 operatives and waited outside the port early. A few scouts were using binoculars to observe the port. "How is it? How is it?" A few operatives seemed to have seen some commotion at the port from afar. They were afraid that someone would steal their merit, so they anxiously asked the scouts. "Leader, the Navy inspectors at the port are currently inspecting the Spanish ship that is about to leave the port. They have already found a telescope and 3 bicycles. Both sides are confronting each other. One of the scouts put down the binoculars in his hand and reported everything he had just seen seriously. A leader heard his subordinates report and said anxiously, "What? They have already found so many things. Won't the merit be taken away by them? This won't do." After speaking, he strode towards the place where Dong Hui was standing. Dong Hui was standing under a big tree under the protection of a few operatives. After hearing the leader's report, he only hesitated for a moment before replying, "There's no rush. Let's wait a little longer." Dong Hui was so confident because the other party didn't bring anything big with them during the last transaction. This was something that Gucci had already reported. Although he didn't know what it was, he believed that it definitely wasn't a telescope or a bicycle. These things should be more precious and should be hidden very well by the other party. It shouldn't be easily discovered. The deputy director wasn't in a hurry, so the leader could only go back and continue to wait. It wasn't until nearly half an hour later that the ship's horn sounded. The 5 Spanish ships were about to leave the port that the leader became anxious. How could they let them leave? Didn't they already find the contraband? A scout put away his binoculars and stood at attention. Garcia handed over the 5 Spaniards, saying that everything was done by them and had nothing to do with him. After paying a fine, the Navy inspection team let them leave. This scout not only had excellent eyesight, but he also knew how to read lips. Naturally, he understood everything that happened in the distance. The leader didn't doubt this answer. It was because of this that he quickly turned around and ran towards Dong Hui. Soon, Deputy Director Dong also became anxious. Then he led hundreds of people and rushed to the port. This time, the marine inspection team didn't find anything important, so it was time for them to perform. Dong Hui was very anxious and even a little excited. If they found what they were looking for this time, not only would they make a contribution, but they would also be able to suppress the Navy inspection team. Just thinking about it made him feel very happy. However, before he could bring his men to the port, a group of cold front Navy soldiers had already blocked their way. "What are you doing? The Security Bureau is here to do something, get out of the way." Seeing that someone was blocking his way, Dong Hui's face was filled with anger, and his voice had a hint of roar. He received accurate information that there was something wrong with the Spanish fleet. At this time, not to mention the cold front Navy soldiers blocking his way, even the senior officers of the Navy headquarters couldn't stop him. With full confidence, he was about to continue to stride forward, but everything was stopped by the appearance of a figure. Dong Hui had to stop and stand in place. Fifth brother. Just opposite more than 100 people from the Security Bureau, a man in a gray tang suit walked out. His face was very calm, and even if one looked carefully, there seemed to be a smile on the corner of his mouth. But it was such a person. As soon as he appeared, the members of the Security Bureau stopped on the spot. Chapter 1361. Not because of anything else but because the person who came was called Yang Wu, known as Brother Wu. "I've been waiting for you for a long time. You're really patient. By the way, where's Dong Hui?" Yang Wu said in his own voice unhurriedly. Dong Hui, who was called, immediately walked out of the crowd and came to Yang Wu. He stood at attention, reporting to Brother Wu. Dong Hui, Deputy Director of the Security Bureau in Crimson City, reporting for duty. Don't be fooled by the appearance of the Security Bureau. Once they received information, they even dared to investigate. Most of the time, the way they worked was not so gentle, and it was obvious that few people could buy face from them. However, Yang Wu was definitely an exception. Anyone could do something wrong and betray, but the servants of the Yang family were an exception. They were Bugnam of Gojoseon's most trusted people, and more often than not, they could make decisions on behalf of the king. This kind of person was also not someone the Security Bureau could afford to offend. "Haha, Deputy Director Dong, I haven't seen you for a while. Well, why don't you come with me? By the way, you can dismiss these people first." Yang Wu recognized Dong Hui. No matter what, he was still a deputy director and his rank was not low. Seeing that he had found the right person, he passed down the order, canceling the operation and taking him away. If it was someone else, they would inevitably doubt themselves when they heard this. Even if they encountered a problem, they would be scared to the point of peeing their pants on the spot. But Dong Hui believed that he had not done anything wrong to Bugnam of Gojoseon in his position, so he was not afraid. "Okay, I'll go with Brother Wu. Everyone else, go back to your posts." Dong Hui did not even hesitate and decided to do as Yang Wu said. That was because he completely trusted Yang Wu's character. But others did not think so, especially the action team leaders. They were not worried about the safety of the deputy director. If there was really a problem with the deputy director, it was not something they could solve with their involvement. They were now worried that once the Spanish ships left, they would not be able to catch up with them. Therefore, a few bold team leaders couldn't help but stand up and say, "Deputy Director, those ships are about to leave." This time, Dong Hui didn't have to answer. Yang Wu gave the answer. "Don't worry, they have already been inspected by the Navy inspection team, so there won't be any problems. You can now listen to Deputy Director Dong's order and disperse." Yang Wu even knew what they were looking for. This time Dong Hui felt relieved. Since the other party had made things so clear, he must have been prepared. Dong Hui no longer had any doubts and said to Yang Wu, "I'll have to trouble you to lead the way, Brother Wu." "It's no trouble. Come with me." Yang Wu was very satisfied with Dong Hui's performance. He was neither anxious nor impatient, nor did he have any guilty conscience, which was enough to explain a lot of problems. He turned around and walked towards the city under the protection of a group of marine soldiers. Department of Commerce. Gucci had been waiting outside for more than an hour with the two groups that Dong Hui had chosen, as well as his own team members. Seeing that it was almost time for the arrest, but Director Lu Qing had no intention of coming out, he couldn't help but feel a little anxious. After all, there was not enough evidence to prove that there was a problem with Lu Qing. If he brought people to rush into the Department of Commerce and proved that the other party was innocent, who would bear the responsibility? He was afraid that as the team leader he would be the first to be charged and punished. However, Deputy Director Dong Hui had already given the order that if he couldn't bring Lu Qing back on time, if something happened, he wouldn't be able to bear the responsibility. After thinking about it, he finally decided to take the risk and arrest people in the Department of Commerce. In order to minimize their influence, Gucci only brought along 2 members who were good at fighting and left the rest outside. The 3 of them went straight to the Department of Commerce on the opposite side. After revealing their identities, Gucci and the other 2 walked into the building of the Department of Commerce without any obstruction. They came to the office on the 3rd floor with the sign of the Director of the Department of Foreign Liaison. Taking a deep breath, Gucci knocked on the door. When he heard the words, "Please enter," he pushed the door open and entered with his 2 team members. Gucci had already repeated the various actions after seeing Lu Qing countless times in his heart. He thought that it would be fine if the other party agreed, but if he didn't, he would have to use force to solve the problem. However, when he pushed the door open, his entire body froze. It was not for anything else, but because he saw 2 unrelated people in the office. More importantly, he couldn't afford to offend these 2 people. One of them was even his superior, the director of the Security Bureau in Chichen City, Che Chao. The other person's status was not low either. He was the director of the Department of Commerce, Chang Chenhao. It was said that this person was one of the students that Bugnam of Gojoseon valued very much. In terms of status, he was probably even higher than their director. Moss. Director Minister Chang. Gucci was already shocked speechless by everything in front of him, not to mention the 2 team members behind him, who were trembling all over. They didn't know what was going on. However, the 3 people in the office all had smiles on their faces. There was no need to talk about Lu Qing. Because of his fat, standing there without moving gave people the impression that he was smiling. However, their director Che Chao's face was also full of smiles at this moment. "Director Che, your subordinates are not bad. Although they were a little late, they still made a move. It seems that the name of our Department of Commerce is not enough to shock people." Chang Chenhao had a smile on his face and a hint of ridicule in his voice. It sounded like he was complaining. However, Che Chao was very clear about the cause and effect, so no one knew better than him whether this was praise or derision. He also smiled and said, "It's okay. It would have been better if they could have rushed in faster." Gucci was stunned by the words of the 2 big bosses. Just when he was at a loss, Che Chao and the other 2 had already stood up. When they passed by him, Che Chao's voice was heard. "Gucci, tell your people to leave. Do what you need to do. As for you, leave with me." Whether it was the dock or the Department of Commerce, all the arrangements were over before they started. However, this ending was just another kind of beginning. When the 2 sides finally gathered in front of the palace, Yang Wu, Chang Chenhao, Che Chao and Lu Qing looked at each other and smiled. Only Dong Hui and Gucci were left with a confused look. Fortunately, they didn't have to wait for long. In a side hall of the palace they saw the leader of Yangxia Yang Chendong. Then, the 2 of them understood what had happened. It turned out that Lu Qing didn't contact Garcia personally, but was ordered by Minister Chang Chenhao. Like the telescope, the bicycle, they were all taken out to gain the other party's trust. The facts also proved that Garcia did indeed believe them, which also revealed his ambition. In his greed, he actually wanted the construction blueprint of the rail car, which was enough to show how big his ambition was. What was rare was that this secret was unexpectedly found out by the security bureau on the way, which led to these things. Yang Qindong sat directly at the top of the hall. Below him stood the deputy commander of the Navy headquarters, Gao Xiong, a group of Navy officers, and a group of Army officers led by Leng Song. Of course, City Lord Yu Qian was also indispensable. He was the only person who had a seat, and he was also the one closest to Yang Qindong. Even if this was because Yu Qian was already very old, in his 60s, it was enough to show that Yu Qian was important in Yang Qindong's heart. Not bad. This time the security bureau reacted very quickly. Director Che, your soldiers are good, continue to work hard. Yang Qindong said in a good mood. Being praised by Yang Qindong in public, Che Chao was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. He immediately said, yes, thank you 6th young master for your praise, we will continue to work hard. Yang Qindong nodded, then turned his gaze to Chang Qianhao and Lu Qing. Not bad, you used a good method to lure the snake out of its hole. This is what a student should do. Chang Qianhao was not so excited. Wasn't it supposed to be a student getting the teacher's approval? Yang Qindong nodded with a smile, then his gaze fell on the group of officers. His voice suddenly became sterner. You all see it, right? Danger is everywhere. Don't think that just because we are so powerful now, no one will dare to target us. Let me tell you, there is no lack of ambitious people in this world. In their eyes there is no right or wrong. What they want to do is right. In their eyes there is no strong or weak. They are the strongest. With such people, if you don't work hard, you are falling behind. Sooner or later you will be surpassed and you may even become a prisoner. The stern voice made the faces of Gao Xiong, Leng Song and others become very ugly. However, they could not explain anything. They immediately lowered their heads and looked like they were admitting their mistakes. During this period of time, Yang Qindong had seen and heard some unpleasant things when he was inspecting the army. For example, the officers in the army were very arrogant, as if they were the number one in the world. In their eyes, they were the strongest army in the world. It was a good thing that they did not find trouble with others. No one would dare to find trouble with them. Self-confidence was a good thing, but arrogance was a bad thing. If they failed because they underestimated the enemy, the military officer would be held accountable. This involved how many people would die after losing the war, how many families would be separated, and how many people's happiness would be affected. Based on this point, Yang Qindong would not only punish them, but might even kill them. Based on Yang Qindong's understanding of the situation, the current Leng Feng army had this kind of arrogant mentality of underestimating the enemy. They believed that they had the most powerful firearms in the world, so they thought that they were superior and did not put any opponents in their eyes. Today, Yang Qindong decided to use this opportunity to remind the officers. If there were still people who did not recognize the reality, then he did not mind punishing some of them. It was better than losing soldiers on the battlefield and dying in battle. Chapter 1362. Leng Feng is strong because you have powerful firearms, the most scientific training methods, the nutritious meals that give you a good physique, and the unparalleled logistical support. But what if you lose these? If you also don't have enough to eat and carry broken weapons, how many more battles can you win? If we give you war horses, will you be able to defeat the 1st Cavalry Division? Can you? Yang Qindong's smile disappeared completely. When he looked at Leng Song and Gao Xiong, his face was cold. The 2 lieutenant generals were the first to lower their heads. The group of major generals behind them also hurriedly lowered their heads. At this moment, no one dared to meet Yang Qindong's gaze. Leng Feng wasn't that weak. Even if they didn't have powerful firearms, normal people wouldn't be their match even if they had swords. However, they were able to do this because of the special treatment they had received. The so-called special treatment referred to the most scientific training methods and the nutritious meals they ate. Leng Feng didn't need to worry about their daily lives. They had the best guarantee, whether it was food, clothing, shelter, transportation. Even their families benefited from it. Without any worries, the results of the training were naturally very obvious. But what if they lost all of this? How much of their fighting spirit could they achieve? Leng Feng's officers probably didn't know. Under the reprimand, all the generals lowered their arrogant heads. Many of them even broke out in a cold sweat. This was the effect Yang Qindong wanted. No matter what a person did, they had to have a string in their head. Without this string, they wouldn't have any fear. Their arrogance would grow and they would suffer a loss sooner or later. He didn't want to see Leng Feng suffer such a loss. Therefore he had to hit them with this stick. Look, even a merchant knew how to make up for his weakness. He knew how to steal the good things in Sushan City for his own use. However, Leng Feng's officers were still arrogant. They thought they were the best in the world. If this continued, it would be strange if they didn't suffer a loss on the battlefield. After venting his anger, Yang Qindong's expression looked better. When he looked at the officers, his voice was no longer as harsh. Deputy Commander Gao, how's the map of the sea? Gao Xiong, whose name was called, shuddered. He took a step forward and said, Sixth young master, the situation of the surrounding sea has been completely figured out. Now we have a detailed sea map of the surrounding 1,000 miles. If necessary, as long as the order is given, the navy can be dispatched and completely occupy this sea area. Gao Xiong was full of confidence when he said this. Over the years, the navy has rarely fought against foreign forces, but it's not like they didn't do anything. On the contrary, every time they patrol the sea they try their best to perfect the sea map, including where there are reefs, where there are shoals, where is the most suitable place for landing, how long is the time difference between the appearance of typhoons, and so on. 1,000 miles? Far from enough. This answer didn't satisfy Yang Qindong. His goal was too far, so far that no one dared to think about it. Yes. Gao Xiong, who didn't receive any praise, trembled again. He could see that the sixth young master wasn't satisfied, but this was already the result of his best efforts. If he wanted to make the map more accurate and farther, he would have to deal with the fleets of other countries and get more information from them. However, at sea the map was like the root of life. How could those people be willing to hand it over? He had tried to spend money to buy it, but unfortunately the results weren't very good. With all kinds of worries in his heart, Gao Xiong didn't know what to do to satisfy the sixth young master. However, before he could express his difficulties, Yang Qindong, who was sitting at the head of the table, had already spoken. There are some things that we can't do on our own. If we can't do it, we can ask others for help. Things that can be done with money are naturally the simplest. If it can't be done, we can use force. There are still many people in this world who cherish their lives. If the whole Yangtze was not very rich because of its rapid development, then the navy didn't have so many worries. They controlled this part of the sea, and every time they went out to sea they would bring in a lot of income. Especially after they listened to Yang Qindong's order and began to catch fish in the sea, their income was second only to the existence of the Ministry of Commerce. Needless to say, the Ministry of Commerce. Since ancient times, traveling merchants have been the most profitable industry. In addition, Yangtze has produced so many new things. Every time something appears, it will attract the attention of merchants from other countries. Yangtze's goods never cared about the price, it only cared about whether they could get the goods or not. As long as a merchant can get the goods, they would make a lot of money. For this reason, the days of the Ministry of Commerce were naturally very good. Every year they would also pay a large amount of business tax to the city lord's office, allowing them to do whatever they want. In addition to them, the second in line was the navy. Unlike the rewards the army received after winning a battle, sometimes even if they won a battle on the ground, they still wouldn't be able to get anything useful. After all, humans were still too poor right now. The sea was completely different. Every time they went out to sea they could bring back a large number of seafood from the sea. After processing, they would be transported to various places to be sold. That was an endless amount of silver. For example, the matter of catching whales. Due to their enormous size and their entire bodies being treasures, every time one was caught, the profit would be at least 100,000 taels of silver. And this was when they were directly sold to the Ministry of Commerce. If they were sold to other places through the hands of merchants, the profit would be immeasurable. And just this transaction alone made countless people jealous. But everyone knew what was going on and no one else could do it. The size of the whale was not something that ordinary ships could deal with. Doing such an exclusive business was naturally as satisfying as it could get. Yang Qindong said to find other people to help and use money to buy the route map because the navy didn't lack money. Then he said to use force, which immediately made Gao Xiong's eyes light up. Sixth young master, using force is naturally the best way, but in this way, I'm afraid that others will know our purpose, and I'm afraid that some places will be guarded. Guarded? Can a dead man still speak? Yang Qindong's mouth slightly raised and he coldly snorted. He never thought that he was very benevolent. In his previous life, in order to complete various tasks, he didn't know how many people he killed. Of course, the people he killed were people who deserved to die in his eyes. But if someone wanted to obstruct his great cause of unification, who didn't deserve to die? Not to mention that they were of different races. Not my race, my heart must be different. Gao Xiong understood the meaning of Yang Qindong, and his eyes flashed with light. Sixth young master, this subordinate understands. Please rest assured that the Navy will immediately implement your instructions. The Navy will not be an obstacle to our expansion. Very good. Yang Qindong's face finally looked better, and then he said something that made everyone present excited. This king has decided to start the expansion of the sea in March next year. The navy will be the main force and the army will be the auxiliary force. The implementation will still be the same as on land. Every time we occupy a place, we will relocate the people there. In short, we must put the 5-starred flag in every corner of the world as soon as possible. At that time, everyone must give their full support. Yes. Everyone present understood the meaning of Yang Qindong in an instant, and one by one they answered in an excited voice. After talking about the military, Yang Qindong's eyes fell on Che Chao, Dong Hui and Gu Qi. He knew that they should have a lot of questions in their hearts. Qian Hao, you say it? Yes. The Minister of Commerce, Chang Qian Hao, cupped his fists and stepped forward. Then he recounted the entire story of Garcia's incident. According to Chang Qian Hao, Director Lu Qing went to contact the Spanish businessman Garcia under his orders. The so-called bicycle and binoculars were just chips to gain the other party's trust, including the rail car blueprint that was traded with the other party in the end. Now, this person should have taken those blueprints to the sea and is on his way back to Spain. The marine inspection team appeared and detained the telescope and the bicycle, but they only took away the rail car blueprint. For Yang Xia there was no loss. The reason why he did this was to send a friendly signal to Garcia. They are all friends and will not meet on the battlefield. Now it seems that the goal has been achieved. So that's how it is. This was also the first time Che Chao had heard of such a thing. Feeling that he had understood everything, he immediately smiled and said, "In that case, the blueprint that Director Lu gave the other party must be fake. Hehe, not only did you get the money, but you also gave the other party an illusion without any losses. Well done." No. Chang Qianhao smiled and shook his head. The blueprint is real. If not, how can we let the other party see our friendship? What? It's real? Then this. Che Chao's face turned ugly. If all of this was real, in his opinion, the sacrifice was too big. Fortunately, Yang Qindong spoke at this time. It's nothing. Even if there is a blueprint, some things can't be built so quickly. Just the iron smelting alone is enough for them to prepare for a period of time. Of course, if they can really build it, wouldn't it be better? It would save us some trouble. When these words were said, everyone was stunned at first, but then they suddenly understood and nodded. Yes, the navy is about to expand on the sea. One day Spain will become a part of Yangtze. If they have any scientific results, wouldn't it help the entire Yangtze? Chapter 1363. After figuring out this point, everyone's expression became much better. Everyone had a deeper understanding of Yang Qindong's strategy. Garcia was probably still secretly happy at this moment, but if he knew that what he got was what Yang Xia wanted to give him, and that he had successfully misled them, it would be too late for him to cry. Immediately secretly arrest Anthony and learn more about the situation on the other side of Spain from his mouth. At the same time, arrange for people to learn the Western language so that it will be easier to manage them in the future. Yang Qindong saw that the matter was settled, so he made a final conclusion. After saying this, he looked at Director Che Chao of the Security Bureau and nodded approvingly. This time, the Security Bureau reacted very quickly, which is worthy of praise. I will record this merit. I also hope that you can continue to work hard and find more problems hidden in the dark. Che Chao, who was praised, was very excited. He immediately stood at attention and gave a standard military salute. Please rest assured, 6th young master, our Security Bureau will work hard and strive for new achievements. The matter of the Spanish merchants was over. Not long after, Anthony was arrested. After the Security Bureau used certain means, he lowered his noble head and was willing to tell everything he knew. Not only that, the Security Bureau, with the help of the Navy, began to secretly arrest some other foreign sea merchants who came to Resin City. From their mouths, more and more navigation maps fell into the hands of the Navy headquarters, making full preparations for the battle at sea in March. Yang Qindong was still constantly monitoring and guiding the work of Resin City, guiding Yangtze's development with some of the vision and ideas of the future generation. At night he was busy in the palace. Now he only has a son and a daughter. In the future, the huge family business will obviously not be enough for them, so he needs to work harder. Fortunately, Yang Qindong has the strength of a grandmaster. Even if he works hard, it won't hurt the foundation of his body. In addition, his wives are very cooperative, so it's only a matter of time before results are produced. On the grassland battlefield, although Yang Qindong was no longer there, the troops left there were still seriously carrying out the strategy of besieging the city. The results were also very obvious. If it wasn't for the arrival of winter and the heavy snow, the entire Yili Inner District would have been under Yang Xie's control. Southern Ming Dynasty Department of Aristocrats. Zhu Huichen's expression was a little unsightly. Zhu Huitu, who betrayed his elder brother and younger brother and became the king of 3 provinces from King Guangdong, finally realized that he had been fooled by Zhu Qizhen after more than 2 years. What does it mean to be in charge of military affairs but not political affairs? At first, Zhu Huichen thought that as long as he had military power, he could do whatever he wanted. But who would have thought that raising an army would require money, especially when he had 500,000 soldiers? Every month, even every day, his expenses would be enormous. If he hadn't reached an agreement with Yang Qindong, where he would give 200,000 Han people every year in exchange for the exclusive distribution rights of Yang Xie's products in the 3 provinces, he wouldn't have been able to hold on until now. But even so, he still needed to supplement a lot of money from his own treasury. After more than 2 years, he felt that he couldn't hold on any longer. Zhu Huichen gnashed his teeth in hatred and called his most trusted civil official Qin Tian to discuss how to solve the problem. Increase the amount of trade with the 5-star army. We will provide 400,000 Han people every year, but the goods they provide must also be doubled. After discussing for a while, Qin Tian finally came up with an idea. Good. Zhu Huichen nodded heavily. I'll leave this matter to you. But this still can't solve the fundamental problem. Zhu Qizhen wants to make things difficult for me? Then I won't let him have it easy. Order people to pressure Shiping Wang Mu Bin and ask them for food. Secretly send people to contact the Bengal army and make them act as if they are pressuring us. I don't believe that old man will dare to disobey. Pressure Mu Bin. With his strong military power, he could naturally force him to submit. Squeezing some food or even gold and silver was not a problem. But this would naturally cause Emperor Yingzong to be dissatisfied. If it wasn't necessary, Zhu Huichen wouldn't want to do this. But now he had no better ideas. Even if it made the emperor unhappy, he had to try it. After Qin Tian heard this, his face showed some hesitation. He wanted to say something to dissuade him, but he thought that there was no other way. Angering the emperor was better than not being able to live. He could only nod and agree. The moment Zhu Huiqiang made a move, the relevant telegram was immediately sent to the palace of Tsushin City. After reading the telegram, Yang Qindong was displeased. Does this Zhu Huiqiang only know how to contact foreigners to bully the Han people? Beta Persei, who had followed Yang Qindong for many years, immediately understood the meaning of his words. He immediately said, "Young master, don't worry. I will immediately arrange for people to warn the king of the 3 provinces." Yes, we have to warn him. You can tell him clearly that there is no problem with doubling the population and doubling the goods. However, if he dares to join forces with other countries to bully the Han people, there is no need for the Southern Ming Empire to make a move. My 5-star army will be the first to destroy him. If he had to say who he hated more between foreign enemies and traitors, it would definitely be the latter. Towards those who had no ancestors and no sense of nationality, once he made a move, he would not be lenient. A telegram was an order. Very quickly, Yang Xie's envoy received the order and went to meet the king of the 3 provinces on the same day. No one knew how the discussion went, but in short, the Bengal army quickly retreated from the border of the southern Ming, allowing the people there to have a chance to breathe. The 5-star army had already agreed to double the population and goods. Shiping's King Mubin could not stand the pressure of Zhu Huichen's army and gave out some food and money. On the surface, it seemed that Zhu Huichen's danger of raising an army was temporarily resolved. However, he was not happy at all. It was not for any other reason, but because the attitude of the emissary sent by Yang Qindong was very bad and very threatening. What kind of person was Zhu Huichen? For glory, wealth, and power, he was even willing to send his own brothers to the guillotine and was willing to betray them. How could such a person be willing to be threatened by others? Therefore, even though he agreed to Yang Qindong's request to not let foreign countries oppress the Han people, in fact, he had already done so. However, after the envoy left, he smashed a few sets of porcelain bowls, one of which was expensive, his favorite tea set. He's going too far, he's going too far. We're all kings, why did he do this, why did he do this? Zhu Huichen was so angry that he cursed in the main hall. The maids and servants at the side did not dare to breathe too loudly. After smashing the bowls, his anger finally subsided. Then Zhu Huichen dove into his bedroom and went to sleep. He slept until the sky turned dark and only woke up. After shouting for someone, the person who appeared in front of him was actually Qin Tian. Looking at his most trusted think tank, Zhu Huichen finally didn't show his displeasure. Instead, he gave a wry smile and said, "Why are you here, sir? Did some reckless servant go to invite you?" Alas, these people are really ignorant. No, no. Qin Tian hurriedly waved his hand. Although when Zhu Huichen was angry in the past, the servants had no choice but to invite him twice. This time he was not invited but uninvited. Your Majesty, there is a very confidential matter to discuss with you. After a quarter of an hour, a neatly dressed Zhu Huichen appeared in the secret room. Opposite the candlelight was a very ordinary-looking man of about 30 years old. If he were to be thrown into the streets, no one would be able to recognize him the moment he turned his head. However, when such a person saw Zhu Huichen, he did not show the slightest bit of nervousness. Just this boldness alone was enough to prove that he was not an ordinary person. Who are you? Zhu Huichen was displeased. If this person had not been introduced by Qin Tian, he was afraid that he would have been angry and punished. This humble one greets your highness, the third province king. The person was not angry or panicked. He first bowed and then opened his right hand, handing over a banknote worth 10,000 taels with both hands. Although a banknote worth 10,000 taels was not much, at least it made Zhu Huichen's expression look a little better. Of course, it was only 10,000 taels of silver. It was not worth it for Zhu Huichen to reach out and accept it. He just looked at the person curiously. One should not accept a reward without doing anything. Before he knew the purpose of this person's visit, he would not casually accept the money. The newcomer seemed to have thought of this long ago. He just grinned and revealed a simple and honest smile. If it wasn't for his previous calm and composed performance, he would have given off the impression that he was an honest farmer. This humble one is Emogue. I am here to clear your doubts. Emogue? Clear my doubts? What doubts does this prince have? Zhu Huitu chuckled, and there was a hint of horror in his laughter. Emogue, who was not affected by Zhu Huichen's laughter, spoke up. Your Highness, you have great ambitions. It is a pity that He Shengdong and Bugnam of Gojoseon's appearance overshadowed your glory. If you want to achieve great things, you have to get rid of Yang Xie first. Now there is an opportunity in front of you. I wonder if you are willing to seize it. Zhu Huichen naturally knew what He Shengdong meant. He had just been warned by Yang Qindong and was furious. Emogue had appeared. He had to admit that he had chosen the right time. But did he really think he was stupid? Before he could figure out the other party's background, he would not say anything that was on his mind or speak the truth. Aha! Zhu Huichen just laughed and did not make any comments. Emogue still did not care about this. Instead, he put the banknote worth 10,000 taels of silver on the table and said, if there is an opportunity to get rid of Bugnam of Gojoseon, would you be willing to do it? Of course, before that, you don't need to do anything. If Bugnam of Gojoseon is really in trouble one day, you only need to move your fingers and hit him when he is down. Your Highness does not need to answer this humble one's question. If there is an opportunity, you can decide whether to do it or not. If there is no opportunity, you can just bide your time. This 10,000 taels of silver is my master's sincerity. At least it shows that I am not a person who likes to talk nonsense. Okay, if there is an opportunity, we will meet again. Chapter 1364. Before Zhu Huichen could give an explanation, Emogue had already turned and walked out of the secret room. Zhu Huiyun didn't stop him. Why would he stop him? He didn't do anything and gave him 10,000 taels of silver. Even if he was crazy, Zhu Huiyun still liked him. If he could meet dozens of crazy people like him in a day, would he stop? Of course, Zhu Huiyun didn't think Emogue was crazy. Since he said so, something might happen. What he needed to think now was what to do when the opportunity presented itself. Qin Tian brought him here, so Zhu Huiyun naturally wanted to hear his thoughts. Minister Qin, what do you think? Your Highness, let's just pretend that nothing happened and do what we should do after receiving the banknotes. If it really is as this person said and such a day really comes, it won't be too late for us to plan for the long term. Otherwise, let's pretend we didn't see him. It's not a bad thing to take the money for free. No one would complain about having too much money. Although 10,000 taels of silver wasn't much of a problem for Zhu Huiyun, who had 500,000 soldiers, it was free. But after all, he had gotten it for free. Who would complain that it was too little? Zhu Huiyun nodded silently, obviously approving of this decision. But in fact he was very curious. This Emogue was obviously just a messenger. He had a master behind him. Who was this master? If he guessed correctly, the person behind Emogue must know him and Yang Qindong very well. How could it be a coincidence that Emogue made a move right after Emogue threatened him? Interesting. Thinking that there was someone who knew Yang Qindong so well and was secretly watching everything, Zhu Huiyun suddenly became interested. He even began to look forward to that moment. If that day really came, he would definitely make a move. He had long coveted Yangxia. Thinking of the countless good things in Yangxia's territory, once Yang Qindong was in trouble, Yangxia would be like the sky falling. It would definitely be chaotic. When that time came, he would definitely make a move. Countless riches would be waving at him. That day would be his chance to achieve great things. Far Eastern Province. After entering winter, it snowed for 3 days. The thickness of the snow at the highest point was 60 centimeters. This was just the beginning of winter. It could be imagined that there would be more snow like this in the future. Tang Sheng of the 4th Cavalry Division walked out of the tent. When he saw the white snow in front of him, his expression became nervous. He began to worry about whether his tribe had suffered a disaster, whether there were casualties, and whether they had enough food. Tang Sheng wasn't a pure Han. His mother was Han and his father was Mongol. Back then, the Mongol cavalry raided the fields to raid his mother and gave birth to him. His poor mother died of an illness not long after giving birth to him, leaving only his father and grandfather to depend on each other for survival. When he was a teenager, his father died in a battle over a good piece of pasture between tribes. So he left his hometown with his grandfather and the tribe and came to Siberia. Tang Sheng was good at fighting. In the end, he was noticed by Qin Bo during a battle against the 5-star army and was promoted to the position of division commander. However, it was a pity that the Far Eastern region was based on the Han people. The clans that had killed countless Han people had a grudge against the Far Eastern region. Commander Qin Bo didn't have a good impression of such people. Plus, the space in the city was limited, so it couldn't accommodate so many people. No matter how Tang Sheng tried to persuade him, he wouldn't let them in. Helplessly, he had no choice but to use his authority to find a place for them to stay in between the Far Eastern Prefecture and the West Siberian Prefecture. From time to time, he would send people to greet them and bring some food and other necessities. With the snow, the roads were blocked and Tang Sheng began to worry. However, he had a duty and could not move without a military order. In addition, the snow had blocked the road. Even if he sent out his trusted aides, they would not be able to get results immediately. This made him feel uneasy, as if ants were crawling in his heart. Give the order to clear the snow and check the situation. If the people are in trouble, open the granaries and release food. Tang Sheng gave the order to a messenger behind him. At this moment, Tang Sheng was displaying the authority of a division commander. After 5 days, the snow was cleared and a batch of food was released, so the people around the 4th Cavalry Division didn't have to worry about food. However, as a division commander, Tang Sheng's face was still filled with worry. The people of the Far Eastern Province had the help of the Yuan Province Army, so normal disasters couldn't do anything to them. But what about his tribe? Would they be able to pull through? On the 6th day, a tribesman whom Tang Sheng had been looking forward to suddenly appeared outside the big tent. Tang Sheng was excited, but at the same time his face darkened. This was because he realized that the tribesman named Herrick had tears streaming down his face when he saw him. "Brother Tang, our tribe has been surrounded by Akmu. You have to save them." The winter in Crimson City was no different from usual. In this half-modern city, there were all kinds of strategies to deal with anything. Even if there was a tsunami, there were ways to deal with it. Not to mention there was very little snow in Crimson City in winter, and most of the time there was no snow. It was already January 1461. Under Yang Qindong's constant efforts, the 6th Madame Wan Xiaoyu was pregnant. And this was only the beginning. In January they found out that the 3rd Madame Xiao Yuxue and the 4th Madame Dong Xiangxiang were pregnant. The Yang family's children were a great thing for the Yangxia people, so everyone's face was filled with joy. As the leader of the Yangxia people, Yang Qindong was naturally in a good mood. At night, he was busy with the concubines, and during the day he walked around the factories and schools, leaving traces of him everywhere. At the munitions factory's steel mill, the factory manager, Wu Gang, was showing Yang Qindong the cavalry sabers and war sabers made of fine steel. Wu Gang was a veteran of the Yangxia people. He started working with Yang Qindong in June 1448. After more than 10 years, his steel mill was constantly improving. In the past, he had produced some weapons that could cut iron like mud, but they were not used in the army. At that time, the Yangxia lacked iron ore, and everything had to be cleared for the production of firearms, so the weapons in the hands of the 5-star army soldiers were not bad, but they were far from the best. The Yangxia expanded, occupied a lot of places, and had more iron ore, so improving the quality of cold weapons became one of the important jobs of the steel mill. When Yang Qindong saw that the cavalry saber in Wu Gang's hand could easily cut ordinary swords, his face showed satisfaction and excitement. With such weapons, there would be fewer soldiers dying in the war in the future. The main cement factory. The factory manager, Jing Guang, led Yang Qindong to inspect the 36 workshops in the factory. Among them, 6 workshops and production lines were newly installed. With their efforts, the daily output of cement could reach 500 tons, but it was still not enough for the rapid development of the Yangtze. Manager Jing, we need to continue to expand the production lines. There will be many places that need cement in the future. Don't be afraid that no one will want it. I can tell you that even if your factory produces cement for 100 years, it will still be far from meeting the demand. If you need any help, you can apply to the Ministry of Finance. Yang Qindong knew the use of cement, whether it was building houses or building roads, it was indispensable. Now it could be digested as much as possible. Jing Guang certainly knew the newly established Ministry of Finance, which was established by Yang Qindong to reduce the pressure of Governor Yu Qian. Its role was basically the same as the so-called Ministry of Revenue. The first minister was Luan Shaoqian, who was transferred from Yunnan province. Sixth young master, don't worry. I will go back and apply for more cement. Jing Guang promised. Not only do you have to make more, but the quality must also be guaranteed. The label must be up to standard and it must be checked layer by layer. If it is not up to standard, it will not be allowed to leave the factory. Yang Qindong's face was serious when he mentioned this issue. He knew very well what would happen if the quality of the cement was not up to standard. Repeatedly wasting money was a small matter. If the building really collapsed, who knew how many people would die? The main garment factory. The factory manager, Zhou Hua, accompanied Yang Qindong as he inspected the workshops one by one. Yang Qindong, who had just inspected the underwear factory and the garment factory, had a satisfied expression on his face. The style of the garment can be more varied, and it must satisfy more people's tastes. Yes. Zhou Hua looked at her son-in-law with a satisfied expression. If it wasn't for Yang Qindong's arrival, her family would probably still be living a hard life. As they spoke, they arrived at the military uniform factory. Looking at the green, white, and blue military uniforms that were packaged, Yang Qindong exhaled and said, "The material of the military uniform must be of good quality, warm in winter and cool in summer. Especially the winter clothes, the cotton inside must be of the best quality. We can't let any soldiers catch a cold or get hurt because of the military uniform." Sixth young master, please don't worry. All the clothes produced have to go through 3 inspection procedures. They don't know each other. We have also set up a reward system. Whoever finds a problem will be rewarded. If the problem is not found, they will be punished. This greatly increases their enthusiasm, so there won't be any problems. When speaking of this, Zhou Hua was full of confidence. These ideas were given by her son Luan Shaoqian and daughter Luan Xiaoyu. How could they be wrong? Okay. By the way, mother-in-law, if you have time, you should go to the palace to see Xiaoyu. She is now pregnant, so she is a little nervous. You should go and comfort her. After talking about official matters, the mother-in-law and son-in-law started chatting. Chapter 1365. Shipyard. Accompanied by the shipyard director Hong Yi, Qin Chuan inspected the newly produced warships. The 5-star Army Navy was currently using sailboats. Division-level warships were using Level 4 warships, regiment-level warships were using Level 3 warships, and so on and so forth. After years of hard work, they had finally built a Level 5 warship. The size of the ship and the number of cannons made it the warship used by the officers. We still need to build more warships like this. If there's any need, the other departments will fully cooperate and strive to upgrade all the warships. Looking at the ship that was over 100 meters long, Yang Qindong sighed. Yes, the Navy headquarters also has such a request. In the future, all division-level warships will be upgraded to Level 5 warships. In the future, we will focus on researching Level 6 and 7 warships. Hong Yi said with a face full of excitement. No, there's no need to worry about Level 6 and 7 warships. Right now, the research department is researching steam engines. Once that thing is built, it will be used on Level 6 warships. At that time, the speed will be dozens of times faster than now. Yang Qindong sighed and said, Paper factory. Factory director Kong and led Yang Qindong to inspect many workshops. Looking at the white paper being produced from the production line, Yang Qindong walked forward and took 2 pages. He found that the paper was very sturdy and thick. Very good. In the future, Yang Xie's children will have to go to school. This will require a lot of paper. You will have to work hard. Yes. Kong nodded. We will definitely work hard. After spring we will build more production lines. There won't be any delays. There must be no delays. Education is the foundation of the country. Only when the people have culture and wisdom can the country become stronger. This is the national policy and no one can change it, much less neglect it. Glass factory. A year's GDP and wealth had reached a certain ratio. It had become one of the important sources of Yang Xie's wealth. As the factory director, Qin Ming had his own pride. However, when he faced Yang Qindong, that bit of pride had long disappeared because everything in front of him was created by this person. Glass was not a big deal in Yangxia. It was even used in ordinary households. For example, the windows of many residential buildings were made of transparent glass. But to the Yang family this was still a novelty, especially the various accessories made of glass. Businessmen from other places would rush to buy them. After creating so much production value and wealth, the head of the glass factory, Qin Ming, would be glowing with happiness wherever he went. The factory's confidentiality measures still need to be strengthened. We can't let others steal the results. If you need anything you can go directly to Yang Wu. He will make the arrangements. Yang Qindong was very clear that the production of glass was not that complicated. It could be said that it was not difficult for those who knew how to do it. Once the process was known he could make it, but others could also make it. That would be a big problem. Yes, sixth young master, don't worry. The people in our glass factory are all old. Their families are all in Chichen City. They are also loyal to Yangxia and will not be disloyal. Moreover, the military is also very strict in this area. Every one of them has a detailed record. Qin Ming also knew how serious the situation would be if something went wrong, so he immediately vowed. Good, I'm relieved when you do things. Yang Qindong patted Qin Ming's shoulder. This person was also an old man who had followed him for more than 10 years. All these years there were no problems, which was enough to prove his confidence. Winery. Manager Hong Shi brought in different degrees of liquor for Yang Qindong to taste. He introduced them to Yang Qindong and introduced them to him. Wine was one of the things that men loved no matter where they were. As long as they could afford it, almost everyone would want to drink it. Therefore, as long as the quality of the liquor was good, there was no need to worry about selling it. Yang Xie had opened up a large amount of grain fields. In addition to the appearance of potatoes, sweet potatoes, corn and other crops, the problem of food and clothing had been solved. Not only that, they were also constantly exporting their grain. Right now, the grain that the southern Ming dynasty needed was basically provided by the five-star army. When there was more grain, it was naturally not a good idea to store it in the granary. Using the excess grain to make wine was a better use. Good wine could be exchanged for silver and more money. Right now, the winery was also one of the main sources of income for Yang Xie. Sixth young master, right now, not only do we have 10-degree liquor, 20-degree liquor, and even 55-degree liquor, we have also produced a lot of soft drinks and beverages. Together with the transparent glass bottles, the price will not be low. Hong Shi reported at the same time as he reported his work. Your train of thought is correct. But it's not enough. For example, we can change the packaging of the beverages. Bag packaging and paper packaging can be used. This way we can lower the content of the drinks and even normal people can buy them. This way the sales will be better. Also, for the wine we need to come up with more variations. Don't limit it to just a few types. We can divide it into high, medium, and low consumption levels. While serving the public we can also earn more money. Yang Qindong thought about how the beverages in the future had already become a meal for normal families. Thus, he instilled his thoughts into Hong Shi's ears. Manager Hong Shi listened attentively, and the secretary beside him was also taking notes with a small notebook. After being in Crimson City for a long time, who didn't know that the sixth young master's words were the golden law? They were absolutely correct. Main food processing factory. Zhou Dai was accompanying Yang Qindong to inspect the food production line. Looking at the bags of instant noodles, ham sausages, and various canned food being packed separately, Yang Qindong also reached out and picked up a bag of instant noodles. After casually opening it and tasting it, he nodded. The taste is not bad. The quantity is also sufficient. Yes, these are all prepared for the army. The quantity is 30% more than what is usually sold. This is to let the soldiers eat until they are full. Zhou Dai stood on the side and said, just eating until they are full is not enough. You have to think of a way to eat well. The taste has to be varied. You have to consider the taste of the public as much as possible. Yang Qindong stood beside the production line and gave instructions. Air Force Training Ground. The original Eagle Division had been expanded many times. Although the current Air Force could not be compared to the Army and Navy, the number of people had reached tens of thousands. Coupled with their special mission, they had become a new powerful force that could not be ignored. The Navy commander Tian Yu had the rank of Major General. Wearing a sky blue uniform, he was accompanying Yang Qindong and watching the performance of the Navy soldiers. Dozens of hot air balloons rose into the air, carrying out the various orders given by the ground command. Time and space were sometimes low, sometimes left, sometimes right. After reaching the predetermined position, packs of high explosives fell from the sky, blowing up the original targets one after another. Individual paragliders rose into the air. Using the large or behind them that rotated like a fan, one soldier after another rose into the air. They could follow orders to the west or to the west to complete the high-altitude reconnaissance mission. The development of the Air Force started from scratch, and it was not easy to reach the scale it had now. In this regard, Yang Qindong affirmed their work and also made a request. He also agreed to the request of Tianyu to lead the soldiers to participate in actual combat. From now on, with the addition of the Air Force, any enemy's so-called ambush would have nowhere to hide. They would also become the unique overlord of the sky. Yang Family Academy. The first vice principal Wang Si accompanied Yang Qindong to walk around the entire academy. When Yang Qindong did not return to Chichen City, Wang Si was actually the first leader of the academy. Under his leadership, the Yang family was constantly developing. It was different from the great Ming dynasty's knowledge, which was mainly based on the 8 classics, the 4 books, the 5 classics, and other sages. The studies in the Yang Family Academy were divided into different categories: Chinese, mathematics, geography, science, biology, physics, chemistry, agriculture, labor, and so on. The scholars of Yangxia had long been used to studying many subjects. This represented the comprehensive development of morality, aspiration, physical fitness, aesthetics, and labor. Only such a talent could have everything. Only learning Confucianism in the Yangxia had no future. So far, the Yang Family Academy had cultivated many talents for the Yangxia. Once the students graduated, those with excellent results would be quickly snatched up by various departments. Because of this, more and more young people liked to apply for the academy. With this repeated cycle, the academy had entered a very normal track. Now, the students of the Yang Family Academy had flooded the various departments, and they all considered themselves as Yang Qindong students, gradually forming a strong force. One could imagine that after a few years, when this group of people fully matured, they would become a powerful force. Perhaps even the future Huangpu would not be able to compare. Not only do they have to study, but also have them participate in labor and experience the real life of the common people. Every graduate has to live in an ordinary village for at least a month. This is a hard and fast rule. There are no conditions. Many things can only be said if one truly understands it. If one only reads it from books, not only will it not be deep enough, it will also be easy to be separated from reality. Yang Qindong wanted students who knew what to do, not students who only knew how to talk but not do, or students who only knew how to do but not speak. Yes, this student will remember. Wang Si nodded heavily. Seeing that Wang Si was almost 30 years old, Yang Qindong suddenly stopped and thought of something. Has your grandfather already retired? Wang Si's grandfather was Beiming's Minister of Personnel, Wang Ji, who held a high position and power. In the past, he was the person Wang Ji respected the most. He always thought that one day he could be as capable as his grandfather. But ever since he came into contact with Yang Shui, this thought slowly began to waver. Especially after coming to Crimson City, he no longer envied his grandfather. In his opinion, that position was a waste of life. It was just like a machine going to work and getting off work every day. It was really meaningless. Chapter 1366. Unlike now, where he could come into contact with new knowledge and new things every day in the academy. Every time he figured out a problem, regardless of whether it was a teacher or a student, they would all jump up in excitement. A new window would be opened in front of him, and a new field of knowledge would be unlocked. To him, who thirsted for knowledge, this was the most satisfying thing. It was many times better than working in the yamen every day. Wang Si was very satisfied with his current life, but that did not mean that he did not love his grandfather, especially since this grandfather had been very good to him since he was young. Now that he heard Yang Qindong ask, he replied, "Yes, grandfather has already resigned, and has returned to his ancestral home to enjoy his old age. And then is it possible to bring him here? You should know that regardless of whether it is the climate or the conditions, this place is much better than the other side." This was the Minister of Personnel, and no one knew the officials of Beiming better than him. If such a person was brought to his side, if he could help him, the benefits would be a lot. Of course, Yang Qindong still respected this old man very much. As for the other party, he would not force him before he agreed. Hearing Yang Qindong's suggestion, Wang Xi's eyes couldn't help but flicker, but he quickly calmed down. He knew his grandfather too well. If there was something he didn't want to do, no one could force him to do it. Since he didn't know his grandfather's thoughts, he didn't make any promises. Instead, he said honestly, "Teacher, I haven't discussed this matter with my grandfather, but I will write a letter soon to ask for his opinion." "Sure, if you have any difficulties, you can also look for City Lord Yu Qian and ask him to write a letter as well. After all, we were once colleagues, so we will definitely have more in common," Yang Qindong suggested with a smile, causing Wang Xi to nod his head continuously. Following that, the bank, the art troupe, the bicycle factory, the tobacco factory, and so on all left behind Yang Qindong's footprints. With Yang Qindong's guidance, the various units became even more motivated. After receiving encouragement and advanced guidance, the various industries in Crimson City developed a vigorous attitude towards development. 2 months later, in the 3rd month of the year 1461, Yang Qindong personally brought all the officers above the rank of major to the largest square in the city. Here, a stone tablet that was tens of meters tall and a large hall that occupied an extremely large area was located. The monument was a monument to heroes, and the hall was a memorial hall for heroes. The ashes of all the heroes who died on the battlefield were placed here for future generations to pay their respects. It was precisely because these martyrs were not afraid to shed blood and sacrifice that the Yangxia party was able to grow stronger and the people were able to live a better life. Anyone with a conscience would never forget these heroes who had sacrificed themselves. On the first day of every month, a large number of officers would come to pay their respects. Even during normal times, there would be people taking turns to come every day. They would either burn paper money or offer flowers to express their gratitude. According to the plan, the Navy would set off from the port and begin their journey of expansion. Yang Qindong brought all the officers here to let them receive a re-education of their thoughts. He wanted them to understand what their mission was, and to let them know that compared to the fact that they were still alive, it was already a very fortunate thing. In order for the people of Yangxia to live a better life, they needed to open up more land and territory. During this process, they had to display the spirit of not being afraid of hardships and not being afraid of death. If they were unfortunate enough to die in battle, their corpses would be transported back here to be worshipped by future generations forever. On the square, hundreds of thousands of people from all walks of life gathered here. They personally witnessed their leader, Yang Qindong, offer a wreath to the martyrs. Following that, all the officers above the rank of major swore, shouting slogans that they were not afraid of death, and made all sorts of promises to the martyrs. On that day, many of the people present cried. On that day, many of the officers present had their eyes wide open. On that day, Yang Qindong knelt in front of the monument and secretly swore in his heart that the martyrs would not die in vain. Yangxia would one day unify the world. At that time, even more people would come to pay respects to them. At that time, their heroic souls would be forever remembered by future generations. A day later, all the officers above the regiment level who stayed in Chichen City gathered in the Army headquarters auditorium. Yang Qindong personally taught them what the main contradiction was, what the secondary contradiction was, what the unity of thought was, what the united front was. How to build a base, how to fight a land revolution, how to mobilize the power of the people, how to do diplomatic and united front work well. 2 days later, under the personal escort of Yang Qindong, the Marines set off. Deputy Commander Gao Xiong personally led the team. Several naval divisions were ready to set off. Countless warships filled the military port, blowing their horns and raising their white sails as they set off with the wind. Yangxia's struggle for hegemony on the sea began. 2 days later, Yang Qindong was in the palace accompanying the princess, Hu Yan. A telegram that had just been received was personally delivered to him by Beta Persei. In December, Luan Xiaoyu was pregnant. In January, Xiao Yuxue and Dong Xiangxiang were pregnant. In February, Tuoya and Su Munaer were pregnant. In March, Junko and Hu Yan were pregnant. Yang Qindong was like a hard-working little bee, constantly wandering around the harem, using his strength as a grand master to continuously sow seeds. Fortunately, the results were remarkable. Other than the second wife, Qiao Yin, who already had Lele, all the other wives were pregnant. Even Hu Yan, after having Yang Bo and being pregnant with her second child, was as happy as a little girl. Yang Qindong also took more time to accompany her. When the telegram appeared, Yang Qindong's expression did not change, but a trace of doubt flashed through his eyes. If it was not an important situation, Beta Persei would not dare to send the telegram at this time. But he still came, which could only prove one thing. Something had happened. He reached out and took the telegram. After casually glancing at it, he put it aside as if nothing had happened. Next, he accompanied Hu Yen to watch the new song and dance arranged by the Arts and Crafts Regiment for a while. Seeing that the other party was tired, he asked Xiaoqing and other personal maids to send the madam to rest. After Hu Yan's back was out of sight, Yang Qindong turned and went to the office in the hall. As soon as he entered the large study, Yang Qindong looked at Beta Persei, who followed closely behind him, and asked, "What's going on in the Far Eastern region?" "Young master, after receiving the telegram from Governor Qinbo, I immediately asked the Security Bureau and the CIA. There was soon news from there. It should be that Tang Xing, the commander of the 4th Cavalry Division of the Far Eastern Army, suddenly rebelled and joined forces with the cavalry of a Siberian Mongolian tribe, Khan Hulahin, to attack the state capital of Arqing. After a bloody battle, Governor Qinbo disappeared, and now the Far Eastern region is basically in the hands of Tang Xing." Beta Persei obviously came prepared and reported after investigating the specific situation. "Khan of Siberia? Tang Xing rebelled?" Yang Qindong muttered. After an unknown period of time, a cold voice suddenly sounded. "They are courting death." At this time, Yang Xie was so powerful that others were afraid that they would find trouble with him. How could there be people who were so blind as to find trouble with him? There was also that commander called Tang Xing. He was in such a high position, yet he still rebelled. Yang Qindong really couldn't figure it out and was even angrier. However, there were some things that anger alone couldn't solve. What did Tiger's Mane say? Tiger's Mane's new army was in the beginning city, which was the closest to the Far Eastern region. If there was a problem there, they should have reacted immediately. Perhaps the army to quell the rebellion had already been sent out. This. Beta Persei lowered his head, his expression a little ugly. "What do you mean by this and that? I'm asking you, how many reinforcements are you going to send for the new army? Who will lead them?" Yang Qindong wished that he could give Beta Persei a kick. Why did it take so much effort to speak? Where did his usual straightforwardness and cleverness go? Beta Persei didn't dare to dodge Yang Qindong's kick, nor could he dodge it. He straightened his body and said, "Young master, regarding the matter of sending reinforcements, the officers of the new army have different opinions, so much so that Tiger's Mane can't force a decision." The so-called difference in opinions was still pleasant to hear. The truth was that everyone thought that the Far Eastern region was too poor and too far away, so there was no point in occupying it. Think about it, what did they get after occupying the Far Eastern region all these years? Other than the last time when the beginning city was in danger, Commander Qinbo brought 4 cavalry divisions to help, he had always been asking for things. After careful calculation, with so much manpower, material resources and financial resources, not to mention 1 army, even 3 armies could be built. The beginning city had begun to be self-sufficient through its own efforts. Neither Tiger's Mane nor Yumian wanted to continue to ask for help from Qichin City. They wanted true economic independence. The fertile fields on the grasslands and the various small factories in the city were where their confidence came from. However, they still had to provide the Far Eastern region with goods, which greatly dragged them down, making it difficult for them to become economically self-sufficient. Now that there was a problem, wasn't this an opportunity to shift the blame? This was also the reason why they hadn't sent any reinforcements even though they had heard the news from the other side. Beta Persei's words were vague, but Yang Qindong was very clear in his heart. However, he didn't blame Tiger's Mane, Yumian, and the others for this matter. If he wanted to blame someone, he could only blame them for not having enough foresight and not knowing the benefits and importance of the Far Eastern region. "Make the arrangements. After 3 days we will set off. This trip to the Far Eastern region, since no one is willing to do it, this young master will go personally," Yang Qindong said with determination. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, but the problem related to the Far Eastern region should also be solved. Not only that, but the problems of the Golden Horde and the Ross country should also be solved this time. Although he had given Qinbo a lot of ideas, it seemed that the effect wasn't very good. As a mission in the future, he had been to the Far East region and knew the approximate location of some of the minerals there. Once the minerals were developed, the economic returns would definitely shock Tiger's Mane and the others. He wanted to use facts to tell some people that Yang Qindong's decisions had always been very correct. Chapter 1367. Yes. Beta Persei had long since had enough of staying in Resin City. Although his wife and children were in Resin City, he was only in his early 30s. It was not the time for him to retire yet. What he should do the most was to make meritorious contributions. Where would meritorious contributions come from? Staying in Resin City was just for experience. How could it be as strong as leaving this place and opening up new territories everywhere? Beta Persei excitedly went to make arrangements. Yang Qindong sat in the chair in the study room. After thinking about how many troops and supplies he needed to bring with him, he quickly got up. Since he was going to leave, he had to talk to the madam. Over the years they had always been apart more than together. Speaking of which, he owed them too much. No, he had already thought about it. When everything was on the right track, he would take the madam to walk around and accompany them. In the bedroom of the madam, Princess Hu Yen, Yang Qindong dismissed everyone. Even Yang Bo went out to play with the maids, leaving only Yang Qindong and Hu Yen cuddling together. Hu Yen had just been found to be pregnant. It was the time for her to stay still and not move. At this moment, she was half lying in Yang Qindong's arms with a face full of happiness. "I'm sorry." After a long silence, Yang Qindong finally spoke. "Dong Shui, are you leaving again?" After just one sentence, Hu Yan's expression changed and her body trembled. But she quickly hid all her panic. Ever since she married Yang Qindong, she knew that her man was a man who could do great things. He must not be restrained by his love life. Towards Yang Qindong, the 8 madams each had their own way of addressing him. For example, the 2nd Madam Qiao Yin was used to calling him young master, the 5th Madam Tuoya was used to calling him war god, the 6th Madam Wan Xiaoyu liked to call him big brother, the 8th Madam Junko was willing to call him king, and the other madams called him husband. Hu Yan had always called him Dong Shui. The nickname Dong Shui was given to Yang Qindong when he first showed his talent in biming. At that time he was famous for his talent and won Hu Yan's heart. "Yes, there are some things that have to be done. It's just that I'm really worried about leaving you guys behind." Yang Qindong didn't deny it. He was really worried. This time was different from the past. 7 out of the 8 madams were pregnant. How could a father be at ease? "Don't worry, everything in the palace has been handed over to Qiaoyin. With Tai Qingyi, the head of the palace's guards, there won't be any problems. Dong Shui, just do what you think you should do. This concubine will wait for your return in the palace." Although she was very reluctant, Hu Yan still spoke in such a magnanimous manner. This was the overall situation in the eyes of a woman. "All right." Yang Qindong clearly knew that Hu Yan was comforting him. He couldn't help but use a bit of strength in his hands and hug the other party tighter. Yang Qindong was about to leave. Before he left, he quietly stayed with the madams for a while. He also called Qiaoyin and Tai Qingyi over and instructed them to absolutely ensure the safety of the palace. He also called Yang Wu over in front of the 2 of them and left an order. Without special circumstances, no one was allowed to enter the palace and disturb the madams. He believed that Yang Wu would know what to do after receiving the order. It was just 3 days and it passed very quickly. On the morning of the 4th day, the Navy's warship was already waiting at the harbor. Yu Qian, Leng Song, and the rest of the army's higher-ups came to send them off. "Mr. Yu, you have to take care of your body. Leave the small matters to the subordinates. You only need to decide on the big matters and grasp the direction." Yang Qindong held Yu Qian's hand and repeatedly reminded him. The reason why Yang Qindong was able to expand his territory outside was precisely because the headquarters had someone as big as Yu Qian to stabilize the situation. Otherwise, how could he be at ease at the front? "Yes, Your Majesty, please rest assured. This subject understands," Yu Qian said with an excited expression. This time, with Yang Qindong's return, the relationship between the 2 of them was clearly closer than before. Both of their political ideals gradually walked together, and there was no longer any gap between them. This could be seen from the way Yu Qian addressed Yang Qindong. Yang Qindong finally left and boarded the Navy speedboat that had just entered service. From this boat out of Crimson City, it arrived at the port of Sea City in the 3 eastern provinces. Its speed was more than 2/3 faster than before. Beginning City. Tiger's Mane, Yu Mian, and Yang Si closed the door once again and discussed the problem of the Far Eastern region. Ever since the last telegram requesting for help, there had been no news from there for a long time. They could only receive some auxiliary and unimportant news from the Security Bureau and the CIA. Fortunately, there was no news about Governor Chenbo's arrest. Presumably, there must be a problem with the radio station in Governor Chen's hands. Otherwise, it wouldn't have taken so long to contact us. Now, it seems that we need to send someone to find him and restore contact. Yang Si was the first to speak. He was also the only one among the 3 who supported sending troops to the Far Eastern region. As a servant of the Yang family, the person Yang Si admired the most was Yang Qindong. In his eyes, as long as it was the young master's decision, it was the right thing to do. As long as it was the young master's decision, it was definitely the right thing to do. Since the young master was the one who decided to establish the Far Eastern region and invested so much, if something happened there, it must be saved and rebuilt. Saving people was a must. This was also what Tiger's Mane and Yumian wanted. However, if it wasn't to rebuild it, the two of them had some opinions. Seeing that Yang Si proposed to send people again, Tiger's Mane sighed and said, "We will definitely send people, but how many people to send and what kind of goal we want to achieve, we still need to discuss this matter properly." That's right. It's not difficult to save Governor Qin, but if we want to establish a foothold there again, I'm afraid that we won't be able to do it with too few troops. However, considering the difficulty of transporting supplies, if we send too many troops, the logistical pressure will be great. It's really difficult. Yumian also spoke. He spoke from the perspective of a city lord and from an economic point of view. Tiger's Mane was the new army commander, so his focus was more on military matters. He was particular about using the least amount of troops to obtain the greatest benefits. Just from this point alone, there was no need to fight for the Far Eastern region. Yumian was the same. From an economic point of view, investment and income were not proportional, so there was no point in rebuilding the Far Eastern region. The two of them still had the same opinion as before, so Yang Si, who originally wanted to say something, could only shut his mouth. "Alright, since that's the case, I'll send a report to the young master and ask the young master to make a decision." Yang Si didn't have any intention of fighting for it. He didn't want this matter to affect his relationship with Tiger's Mane and Yumian. However, he believed that once this matter was reported to the young master, there would definitely be a result. At that time, with the young master's orders, who would dare to disobey? The telegram was sent out, but what was puzzling was that every telegram was like a stone sinking into the sea. There was no reply at all. After a few consecutive telegrams without any results, Tiger's Mane and the other two couldn't sit still anymore. Regardless of whether it was possible or not, they should at least send a telegram. What did they mean by not asking? Without a definite answer, Tiger's Mane and the other two couldn't help but feel flustered. Did this mean that the sixth young master was dissatisfied? "We can't wait any longer. We have to confirm the number of troops to send out." Tiger's Mane once again called the three of them together and said this. It was almost April. The road leading to the Far Eastern region had already been opened, and the snow was dissipating every day. It was time to attack. How many people should we send? How much logistical support do we need? Can we win in a single battle? Should we bring Governor Qin and the others back, or rebuild the Far Eastern region? How much financial resources and population do we need? Commander Tiger, please give me an accurate number so that I can prepare. As soon as Tiger's Mane opened his mouth, Yumian's questions were thrown out one after another, causing him to choke and his expression to become more and more unsightly. Previously, Tiger's Mane and Yumian had the same opinion. However, now that he hadn't received Yang Qindong's order, Tiger's Mane was a little uncertain. He couldn't stand the pressure and wanted to make a move. Yumian was a little unhappy. He threw out these questions with the intention of letting the other party wake up. As the city governor of the first city and the leader of the local area, Yumian wasn't wrong to say this. He always had to estimate the gains and losses. He couldn't make a decision on a whim. If that was the case, once there was a loss, it might shake the foundation of the first city and ruin the good situation. Tiger's Mane stopped talking and looked at Yang Si for help. Yang Si turned a blind eye to this. He knew very well what kind of person Yumian was. Sometimes, he would even dare to argue with the young master over a problem. He didn't think that he could make Yumian retreat with just his face. "That person has to be sent." Tiger's Mane, who didn't get a response, pulled a long face and looked at Yumian. When he spoke, he was already a little weak. "We have to send someone. No matter what, the Far Eastern region is a part of Yangxia. The brothers there are brothers. However, what I mean is that we just have to save the people. As for the Far Eastern region, it's better to give it up first. When our first city is completely strong in the future, we can think of a way to station troops there." Yumian finally said what he meant. Yangxia had indeed developed rapidly over the years. Countless new things had appeared and they had made a lot of money. However, at the same time, the military expenditure was also very large. Every time they occupied a new place, a lot of money and manpower would be invested in the construction there. For this reason, it wasn't that there weren't other voices. In fact, those who made this sound didn't even account for the number of people. Some people thought that Yangxia was already big enough. What they needed to do now was to stabilize everything. After the territory was consolidated, it wouldn't be too late to send troops to expand. It would just be a few years later. However, this method was stable and there wouldn't be any problems. Chapter 1368. However, this voice had always been suppressed by Yang Qindong. He did not care if others said that he was militaristic, nor did he care if others said that he was a murderous demon king. This was because no one in this world knew better than him how vast this world was and how many places there were that needed to be conquered. Yang Qindong single-handedly created Yangxia and established the five-star army. If even his actions were questioned by his subordinates, one could imagine that if he could not conquer more territory in his lifetime, once he was no longer around and his successor was replaced, would he still have the courage and influence to unify the entire world and make the Han people the only ruler? Yang Qindong did not dare to think about it, he could only lower his head and do it. Fortunately, although the price to pay for occupation and expansion was not small, the businesses in Crimson City were diversified and the money they earned was enough to cover the expenses of the war. For example, provinces such as Vietnam and Laos, after being ruled for many years, had already reached a balance of income and expenditure. If they continued, they would be able to provide returns to Crimson City. Coupled with his powerful charisma and influence, no one dared to publicly criticize the expansion. Even he had to put in so much effort, so he did not dare to leave this matter to others. This was the reason why the primordial city had not sent out any reinforcements even though there was a problem in the Far Eastern region. After Yu Mian expressed his thoughts, Tiger's Mane could only nod his head in agreement after a moment of silence. Alright, then why don't we do as City Lord Yu says? Without a better suggestion, although Yu Mian's method was a little conservative, it was safe. Before Yang Qindong's telegram arrived, it would be better to do as he said. Yang Si did not say yes or no. He was like a mute the entire time, not saying a word. He also did not understand what the young master meant, but his intuition told him that the young master of the Far Eastern region would not give up. Otherwise he would not have sacrificed so much over the years. Yang Si didn't say anything, so Tiger's Mane and Yu Mian made the decision. After some discussion, they decided to send the 101st Division out to assist the Far Eastern region. They wanted to find Governor Chen and bring him back. The 101st Division's commander was Lu Zhua. He was an extremely senior general. He was a calm and steady person, and it was more than appropriate for him to complete the rescue mission. They quickly came to a decision. The 101st Division was ordered to prepare for battle. 7 days later, the army would head north to the Far Eastern state. When an army set out on an expedition, it was necessary to deploy troops, allocate provisions, prepare equipment, clothing, and so on. It was a very tedious matter. Fortunately, the 101st Division was stationed near First City. Otherwise, they would need at least half a month to 20 days to complete the preparations. Time passed day by day, and with the City Lord's Manor and the Logistics Command Headquarters doing their best to prepare, the various resources that were to be taken away were loaded onto carriages. Because the journey was rather long, and the roads were not easy to travel on, just the logistics alone had prepared a total of 1,000 carriages. It was said that this was only the first batch. There would be a second and third batch after that. The army set out. Along the way the men and horses ate and chewed. Every day was a huge expenditure. Just from this point alone, Yu Mian's idea of retreating from the Far Eastern region was not considered a mistake. After preparing for a full 6 days, seeing that the army was about to set off tomorrow, Tiger's Mane called Commander Lu Zhua to his office. The two of them discussed the route of the march, how to protect themselves after entering the Far Eastern region, how to find Qin Bo and the others, and how to retreat safely. Just as the two of them were discussing enthusiastically, the office door was suddenly pushed open from the outside. Tiger's Mane, who was listening to Commander Lu Zhua's opinion, showed a displeased expression. Pushing the door open without permission was a sign of impoliteness. When he wanted to reprimand them, he could only suppress his dissatisfaction when he saw that it was Yang Si. Tiger's Mane still wanted to say something, but before he could speak, Yang Si spoke first. Tiger's Mane, Commander Lu, there's no need to discuss further. The young master is here. What? Hearing that there was no need to discuss further, Tiger's Mane was stunned. When he heard that the young master was here, his mind suddenly went blank. His first thought was that he had heard wrongly. Wasn't the 6th young master in the revered city? He had already heard that 7 out of the 8 madams were pregnant. It had to be said that the young master was indeed proficient in both literature and martial arts. He was actually so powerful in this aspect. Because of this, everyone thought that the young master should be in the palace of the revered city to accompany the madams. Who would have thought that he would suddenly appear in the origin city? That's right, the young master is here. Commander Chiu V of the Vanguard Black Cavalry has already entered the city. Let's go out and welcome him. When Yang Si said this, he was also somewhat in disbelief. However, when he saw Qiu Vi, all his disbelief disappeared. As the commander of the 1st Battalion of the Black Cavalry, wherever he appeared often meant that the young master would appear there. This was an indisputable fact. Hearing that even Qiu Vi had appeared, how could Tiger's Mane not believe it? He quickly put away the map of the Far Eastern region and walked out of the office while tidying up his military uniform. At the same time, his expression was very unpleasant. At this time, the young master had arrived in the origin city. This could only mean one thing. The young master was dissatisfied with their work. As the young master's most trusted person, he felt that his face had lost all light, and even felt a burning pain. With a gloomy face, Tiger's Mane did not care about discussing the war with Lu Jua. At this moment, he strode out of the army headquarters and went straight to the east gate of the origin city with Yang Si. On the way, they met Yu Mian, who was also worried and had an unpleasant expression. However, this time, the three of them did not even want to exchange pleasantries. They just nodded to each other and strode forward. At the east gate, the travel-worn Yang Qindong appeared in the distance with the Black Cavalry. In order to rush for time, Yang Qindong and the others stopped their horses but did not stop. Along the way, they changed their horses countless times and finally arrived at the origin city in the shortest time possible. Compared to the last time he left, Yang Qindong's face was also full of displeasure. Obviously, Tiger's Mane, Yu Mian, and Yang Si's response to the problem of the Far Eastern region this time made him very dissatisfied. However, although he was dissatisfied, Yang Qindong did not intend to blame the three of them. After all, not everyone knew the importance of the Far Eastern region like he did. Even in the future, the Far Eastern region accounted for more than a quarter of the entire country. It was not an exaggeration to say that once it was occupied and stabilized, it would not be far from unifying the entire Russia. Of course, the current Russia could not even be called a country. It was still living a difficult life under the oppression of the descendants of the Mongolian cavalry. At the east gate, Tiger's Mane and the other higher-ups of the origin city stood there. As soon as they saw Yang Qindong appear on the white dragon, the people led by Tiger's Mane knelt on the ground with a plop and pleaded guilty. Let's talk about it after we enter the city. Yang Qindong only looked around before he rode on his horse. This time he did not dismount from his horse and exchange greetings with everyone, which already showed his dissatisfaction. He could not blame these people, but it was necessary to give them some face. Otherwise, if he encountered such a thing in the future, he did not know what would happen. Tiger's Mane and the others followed behind Yang Qindong with a nervous heart and arrived at the palace courtyard of the origin city. When the high-ranking and middle-ranking people were rejected outside the palace and only Tiger's Mane and the other two were left, they once again knelt on the ground with a plop. Beta Persei had already found a chair for Yang Qindong to sit down and then stood aside. This time Beta Persei was also very angry. The young master had requested the development of the Far Eastern region. He had also invested a lot of manpower and material resources and stationed an army there. When something happened there, the origin city was the closest. They should have sent reinforcements as soon as possible. Why did it take so long? No matter what reason they had, it was clear that they did not believe in the young master. Based on this point, Beta Persei had no intention of pleading for Tiger's Mane and the others. As the one who had followed Yang Qindong for the longest time, Beta Persei knew better than anyone else how powerful the sixth master was. Although his mind was also full of doubts about some things, it was undeniable that the young master's strength had completely conquered him. Even if the young master brought him and the two of them to rush into the Great Ming Palace, he would not be full of doubts like others. Instead, he would carry out his orders without blinking. Beta Persei's ability to execute and obey orders was something that Yang Qindong admired very much. Moreover, this person was also smart. He knew what could be said and what could not be asked. This was the main reason why Yang Qindong was willing to keep him by his side. Yang Qindong had no intention of letting the three of them get up. He sat there and listened to their reports. This was especially true for the northern Ming dynasty. When Yang Qindong left, he had already laid the foundation for everything. The defeat of Bai Ming's 400,000 troops had greatly damaged Bai Ming's arrogant momentum. In the end, they had to give in and sent Shi Heng to discuss reconciliation with Yu Mian. 1 million Han people had been sent over, and Gao Yu and the others were also sent back to Bai Ming's imperial court. Naturally, it was impossible for the soldiers who had surrendered to be returned. With people and a sufficient population, many things would be easier to do. The land around the origin city was once again reclaimed in large amounts. A large number of potatoes and corn were planted. It could be imagined that the origin city would be self-sufficient in terms of food in the future. His Majesty personally reported the matter, but there was no joy on his face. All of this was arranged by Yang Qindong before he left. He was just carrying out his orders and did not deserve any credit. Yu Mian had just closed his mouth after reporting when Tiger's Mane, who could not wait any longer, had already opened his mouth. "Young master, I'm guilty. Please punish me." "About the Far East? Well, you don't have to worry about the problems in the Far East. The new army group will take good care of the origin city and be the logistics officers of the new army and the new 5 armies. Yang Qindong simply waved his hand. Chapter 1369. Young Master, our new. Knowing that Yang Qindong was displeased, Tiger's Mane still wanted to continue to fight for it. However, Yang Qindong spoke again. "This time the young master will personally lead the troops, so you don't have to ask for instructions. By the way, this trip will use a lot of manpower. The required food and other things will be transported over from Red Nest City soon. Yes, everything will be handed over to the logistics command." As soon as he spoke, he only mentioned Yang Xi's name and even excluded Yu Mian. Immediately, Yu Mian's expression became very ugly. Yu Mian was not as simple as Yu Qian's son. If that was the case, Yang Qindong would not have given him such an important task. At most, he would have spent more money to find a comfortable position for him to stay. But he didn't. Instead, he placed such an important burden on him. Just this point alone was enough to prove his ability. However, having ability did not mean that he was completely open-minded. At least, when it came to dealing with the matters in the Far Eastern region, he did not do very well. His thinking was too conservative. In this matter, Yang Qindong could also see that a person like Yu Mian had no problem keeping his position, but when it came to pioneering he was still lacking a lot. Since that was the case, he would just guard his home well. This could be considered as making the best use of people. Tiger's Mane and Yu Mian, the 2 people who opposed increasing the investment in the Far Eastern region, had stepped aside. Only Yang Xi, who had always advocated for greater support, was placed in an important position. This already showed Yang Qindong's attitude. By the way, this time, the new Second Army will also be transferred to the front line of the Far Eastern region. The 2 cities that they are guarding, Shajing and Jingzhou, will belong to the new First Army's line of defense in the future. The 2 of you must guard them well. Yang Qindong seemed to have thought of something and added this sentence. After that, he turned around and left. They had not rested along the way, so they had to have a good sleep first. After Yang Qindong left, Yang Xi also had a lot of things to do and went to the logistics command to make arrangements. Only Tiger's Mane and Yu Mian were left behind. Needless to say, Tiger's Mane's performance this time had disappointed the young master. He regretted it 1,000 times. If he knew that the young master valued the Far Eastern region so much, he would not care whether the effort and the reward was proportional. He would have ordered the troops to send support long ago. Now, not only himself, even the new Second Army's army, this time even the new Second Army was thrown to the side. This made him feel very uncomfortable. However, Yu Mian he did not have to admit. After all, we mains, he's mains not, he's unconvinced to the young masters, he to the tiger, and to the main he and main. The Far Eastern region is too far away from us and it's too barren. The more support we send there, the greater the losses will be. I'll talk to the 6th young master about this matter now. I want to dissuade him. As he spoke, Yu Mian strode in the direction Yang Qindong left. Tiger's Mane shuddered and followed closely. He also wanted to see if Yu Mian could persuade the young master. If that was the case, it would at least prove that their decision this time was not wrong. Yang Qindong had just returned to the palace of the first city to wash his face. Just as he was about to go to the bedroom to have a comfortable sleep, Beta Persei came to report that Yu Mian wanted to see him. No, the young master is tired. Yang Qindong waved his hand. Of course, he knew what Yu Mian was going to say. He really did not want to argue with him now. It was not scary for a person to make a mistake. What was scary was not realizing one's mistake at all. However, seeing that his father was Yu Qian, he did not have the intention to argue with him. Young master, you'd better meet him. Governor Yu is kneeling outside the door. He said that if you don't meet him, he will kneel there until he dies. Beta Persei scratched his head and said with a headache. This Yu Mian is really pedantic. After Yang Qindong heard this, he knew that he would not be able to sleep. He knew that the imperial censors of the Great Ming Dynasty were very powerful. Some of them were not even afraid of death in order to help the emperor. On the contrary, some people were proud of it. Even if the emperor ordered them to be killed, they were still excited that they could be written in the history books. Yang Qindong could not understand this at all. This was not lunacy, then what was? However, he had not experienced it in all these years, so he thought that it was just a legend. Now there was finally one. After a sigh, Yang Qindong knew that he had to meet this person. Let him in. Yang Qindong had no choice but to tidy up his clothes and said helplessly, "Young Master Tiger Man is also kneeling outside." Beta Persei reminded carefully, "Come in, come in." One was to raise, two was also to let go. Yang Qindong decided to meet them and see what they had to say. Beta Persei walked out after receiving the order. After a while, Yu Mian and Tiger Man walked into the hall. When they saw Yang Qindong, they knelt together. "There's no need to kneel. If you have something to say, just stand up." Yang Qindong kindly dissuaded them. "No, this time I must speak while kneeling." Yu Mian was like a stubborn donkey that would not turn back until it hit a wall. He raised his head and straightened his neck. Okay. If you want to kneel, then kneel." Yang Qindong looked at Yu Mian, who looked like he would die if he did not kneel. He was too lazy to care. As long as the other party was happy, he could do whatever he wanted. Finally, he could kneel on the ground. Yu Mian looked quite happy. He first straightened his body and then said, "King, it was my idea not to send troops to support the Far Eastern region. It has nothing to do with Commander Tiger. This subject believes that the Far Eastern province is too far away. Moreover, half of the year is cold. There is no future for development in such a cold place. It is not worth investing too much in that place. Now that you have decided on the grasslands, you said that there are many mines near the beginning city. Now what we need to do is to stabilize the situation here, appease the people here and open up grain fields and mines. We will win step by step. When we are strong enough, it will not be too late to think of a way to go north. King, it has always been a taboo for military personnel to go on an expedition. King, you can't put the army in danger because of your reputation. It is not worth it." As he spoke, Yu Mian knelt on the ground and kowtowed. With just a few kowtows, blood seeped out of his forehead. If not for Tiger's mane, who was at the side, who reacted quickly, the consequences would have been even more serious. This scene opened Yang Qindong's eyes. In the past, he had seen in some history books that some upright officials had done all sorts of courting death in order to make the emperor accept them. However, that was only limited to written records. In this life, he had become Bugnam of Gojoseon, but none of his subordinates had done so. He had attributed everything to his own wisdom. Because he was wise, his subordinates would not oppose his ideas. But now Yu Mian's actions had let him know that even if he thought that something was right, others would not necessarily think that way. He sighed in his heart. "Do you think that what is right must be right?" Of course, Yang Qindong would not say such words out loud. It would hurt the hearts of his subjects, and it was not something a ruler would do. What he wanted to do now was not to reprimand but to reason. Using reason to convince the other party was using virtue to convince them. "Ahem, Yu Mian, you said that the Far Eastern Prefecture is a bitter and cold place. Then let me ask you, wasn't the beginning city a bitter and cold place in the past? When we first invested in building the city here, who would have thought that this place would have such a day? Since the beginning city can create miracles, why can't the Far Eastern Prefecture? It's different. Yu Mian raised his head and said rather firmly, "After all, the beginning city is only at the edge of the grassland. Whether it is by land or by water, it can be considered convenient. Moreover, this place has an extremely important military role. It is worth investing a little more here." Then who can say that the Far Eastern Prefecture has no important military geographical role? Who knows if the Far Eastern Prefecture will be as prosperous as the beginning city one day, or even surpass this place? Yang Qindong, who was familiar with the history of the future, knew very well that what he said was correct because the later generations had used their actions to prove all of this. Yu Mian did not know about this. He just thought that Yang Qindong did all of this for the sake of his reputation. In his opinion, Bugnam of Gojoseon already knew that investing so much manpower and material resources in the Far Eastern Prefecture was a losing deal. It was just that he cared about his reputation and could not admit it. Now, he still had to continue to invest more manpower and financial resources in the Far Eastern Prefecture. This was simply going further and further down the wrong path. As a person who was put in an important position and was also a person who had received kindness, Yu Mian had to stand up and speak properly. Although the king's reputation was important, he could not make mistakes again and again just because of his reputation and lose so many people and money. Although Yang Qindong's words were true, it was a pity that Yu Mian, who thought that he had seen through everything, did not think so. Seeing that Yang Qindong was still talking about how good the Far Eastern Prefecture was, Yu Mian's face showed disbelief. This scene was seen by Yang Qindong. He knew that Yu Mian did not believe his judgment of the Far Eastern Prefecture at all. Since that was the case, no matter how much he explained, it was useless. He could only use practical actions to slap his face. All right, since City Lord you does not believe it, why don't we make a bet? Bet? This subject does not gamble. Yumian shook his head and said with disdain. Your mother. Yang Qindong almost cursed out. In the face of such a stubborn subject like Yumian, he really didn't know what to say. He was even more certain in his heart that he had to put on an act this time and succeed. Otherwise, with this victory he was afraid that in the future he would not only have Yumian under his command, but also Wang Mian and Li Mian. At that time, it would be even more difficult to do anything. This would also be a huge blow to his authority, which was something he absolutely did not want to see. No, this time you have to bet even if you don't want to bet. Within 3 years, if the Far Eastern Prefecture is not self-sufficient and cannot prove its important military geographical position, then it will be considered as this king's loss. In the future, if you have any suggestions, this king will listen carefully and can even give priority to your opinion. But if everything is proven after 3 years, then it will be your loss. At that time, when this king makes any decision, you cannot obstruct or interfere. How about it? Chapter 1370. Yumian's problem had to be solved. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble in the future. Think about it. This time, even Tiger's Mane was persuaded by the other party. Yumian himself did not know what would happen next time. It was only a 3-year time limit. It could be said that Yang Qindong was going all out this time. At least, that was what Yumian thought. It was only 3 years. So what if Bugnam of Gojoseon caused trouble for 3 years? Once he failed, there would not be such a rash thing in the future. It was worth it no matter how one looked at it. As for whether the 6th young master would win or not, Yumian did not consider it. He was involved in every bit of the construction process of the first city. There was no need to mention how many difficulties there were. This was because the first city was not too far away from Liaodong and Baiming's capital, so he could get help for everything he needed. Of course, the Far Eastern region would also receive the support of Chichen City. With Bugnam of Gojoseon around, perhaps they would receive more resources. However, so what? After all, it was too far away. Could it really be like the first city? At least, Yumian did not believe it. No matter how one looked at it, this matter was worth a gamble. In the end, Yumian raised his head. Okay, I'll bet. After Yumian agreed to the bet, he could no longer interfere with Yang Qindong's every move. He finally relaxed and the first thing he did was to sleep. No matter what he wanted to do, he had to have a good body first. This was a prerequisite. Just as Yang Qindong was about to fall asleep, news of his bet with Yumian had also spread. This was naturally Yumian's idea. He was afraid that Yang Qindong would go back on his word. He wanted to make this matter a reality. Yang Qindong did not know about this. Even if he knew, he would not care too much. Since he dared to say it, he was naturally confident that he could win. He slept all the way until night. When Yang Qindong woke up, he was full of energy. Beta Persei also took the opportunity to take a nap. When he saw that Yang Qindong had woken up, he carried a basin of water into the room. While his master was washing his face, he said, "Young master, Commander Tianhu, Commander Sherbei, and Commander Dai Qua are all here. All right, summon them into the palace to discuss matters." Yang Qindong put down the towel in his hand, a confident smile on his face. After obtaining Yang Qindong's permission, the world's #1 cavalry division completed the task of expanding the army in a few months. This was all thanks to Baiming's Liaodong cavalry. In the battle with them, they had captured more than 40,000 people. Most of them had been educated and became glorious soldiers in the world's #1 cavalry army. After the expansion, the world's #1 cavalry army's combat strength had also increased exponentially. With more than 40,000 soldiers, they would not be afraid even if they faced enemies several times their number. Needless to say, they were already humiliated by the fake surrender. They were eager to change themselves through a big battle. They naturally responded to Yang Qindong's summons this time. From the commander to the soldiers, they were all full of fighting spirit. Dai Ko was originally a member of the Far Eastern Army. This time he was transferred by Yang Qindong. He wanted to take advantage of the other party's familiarity with the situation to enter the Far Eastern region. With the help of this division, they would be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. When the three saw Yang Qindong in the main hall, they all excitedly saluted. Just from their appearance, they should have made sufficient preparations. Very good. Looking at your appearance, this king has an idea in his heart. Looking at the three, Yang Qindong also smiled. This was a confident smile. Presumably you already know about the matter. Tang Xingjuan's change has caused the situation in the Far Eastern region to be unclear. It has also successfully provoked the anger of our 5-star army. This time, this king will personally go and let those who betrayed and dared to be our enemies know the consequences of angering our 5-star army. How about it? Do the three of you have the confidence to enter the Far Eastern region and show the might of our 5-star army? Yes. The three answered in unison. Their faces were filled with excitement before the big battle. Ah, good. Let's discuss the matter of sending troops. While Yang Qindong was laughing, Beta Persei had already commanded several black cavalry to carry the map of the Far Eastern region. That night, everyone discussed until late into the night before dispersing. With the provisions prepared by the new army group for the 101st Division, Yang Qindong only rested in the first city for 2 days. Then he personally led the 2,000 black cavalry, a regiment under Division Commander Dai Qua, and the 1st Division of the 1st Heaven Cavalry Army to the north as the vanguard. Bei would lead the other 4 divisions of the 1st Heaven Cavalry Army, the other 4 regiments under Dai Qua, and the new 2nd Army to wait for the arrival of the supplies from Resin City. This time, Yang Qindong obviously put in a lot of capital. It was said that there were dozens of large ships and 2,000 carriages of supplies transported from Resin City alone. Besides, Yang Qindong also went straight to the north after leaving the first city. He walked along the road that was previously used to transport supplies. The road from the first city to the Far Eastern region was indeed not short, but the road was not that difficult to walk. On the contrary, they had been repairing the road. They even put in a lot of effort to lay railway tracks for some distance, so the speed of the army's progress was not slow. They walked 250 miles on the first day. This was naturally related to the fact that the vanguard army was lightly armed. However, if they did not have the foundation that they had previously laid, they would not be able to reach this speed. Only 3 days later, the vanguard army led by Yang Qindong personally entered the Chita region. They could already see the shadow of Yablonov Mountain from afar. At this time, the Far Eastern region was like a natural unpolished jade. It had not been exploited or damaged. Looking from afar, the tall mountains and forests were covered in a layer of light green. It was the appearance of the beginning of spring. Due to the climate, the winter in the Far Eastern region came much later than in the Great Ming Dynasty. Along the way, some places where the sun did not shine could still see a small amount of snow. Just based on this, one could feel the helplessness of the bitter cold. In such a climate, it was no wonder that no one occupied such a large territory. However, all of this would change with the arrival of Yang Qindong. Dai Qua had already left with a regiment of soldiers. As the vanguard of the vanguard, he had to find Commander Qin Bo in the fastest way possible. Relatively speaking, the vanguard army led by Yang Qindong did not need to be in such a hurry. They only needed to follow the marks left by the other party. As the army entered the mountain range, the road became more and more difficult to travel. In the past, he had only read on the telegram that 2/3 of the supplies sent to support the Far Eastern region would be consumed on the way because of the road and distance. Yang Qindong did not believe it, but after personally making a trip, he had a deeper understanding of this. He also finally knew why Yu Mian would take such a big risk to stop him from supporting the Far Eastern region. Is the road difficult? Full of difficulties? Yang Qindong snorted. He liked challenges. If the mission was too easy to complete, it would lose its meaning. Just like in his previous life, sometimes in order to complete a task given by his superior, he could hide in a place without moving or eating for 36 hours. Compared to the hardships he had to endure back then, the hardships he was going through now were nothing. Send a telegram to Commander Shibi. Tell him to open up a path for the army. It shouldn't be too wide, but it should pass through the carriages first. If one wanted to be rich, one had to build a road first. This was a truth that could be used anywhere. The biggest obstacle preventing the development of the Far Eastern region was the transportation. If this problem could not be solved, then everything else was useless. After talking about the path, the vanguard army continued forward. After passing Yablonov Mountain, they saw the Stanov Mountain range. After a few days, they saw the Arden River. At this point, the scouts in the vanguard finally sent news that they had seen signs of human habitation. Beside the Arden River, the water plants had already developed from light green to dark green. It was also close to the water source. This kind of place was often the favored environment of herders. It was reasonable to see humans in this kind of place. There weren't many people on the other side, at most 100 or so. When Yang Qindong led the vanguard to the riverside, the originally busy herdsmen panicked. The screams of women, the cries of children, and some young men had already rushed out of the tents with daggers in their hands, standing together at the outermost circle. Herders had their own rules. Once they encountered an unknown situation, the young men in the tribe would habitually protect the elderly, women, and children in the middle. This way they could better protect the tribe in battle. Under normal circumstances, even if these young men were all killed, the elderly, women, and children would not be in any danger. They would only become the slaves of another tribe. It was the same everywhere. If one wanted to survive, they would always need a large number of people. Sometimes, the result of leading two tribes directly to war was just to snatch the population. Sometimes, a woman would be snatched more than a dozen times from her youth to her old age, so much so that she would forget who the first leader of the tribe was. The sudden appearance of the 5-star army, each riding a tall horse and holding a sharp saber in their hands, caused the young men of this small tribe to show fear and powerlessness. When one side's strength was thousands of times stronger than the other side, there was no need to fight this war. This also caused them to feel despair. "Army, stop advancing," Beta Persei shouted after receiving the order. As soon as his loud voice came out, the cavalry warriors of the 1st Division of the world's cavalry army all stopped. Chapter 1371. Army, set up camp here. It was still Beta Persei's loud voice that reverberated through the air. It was good to have Beta Persei. At least he didn't need to use a loudspeaker to pass down orders. The 5-star army cavalry stopped, and so did the black cavalry. Only Yang Qindong, Beta Persei, Tian Hu, and Ba Dao Jiang rode their horses towards the herdsman's tent that was surrounded. The reason why it was called a tent and not a yurt was because these herdsmen were not of Mongolian descent. They were authentic Russian people with white skin. Among the crowd, other than Yang Qindong, it was the first time the other three had seen authentic Caucasians. They couldn't help but look at them curiously. However, Yang Qindong's expression was calm. He rode to the outermost periphery and looked at the 20 or so young men and asked, "Hello, can you speak Chinese?" Of course, this sentence was spoken in Russian. In his previous life, although Yang Qindong entered the military very early and didn't have the opportunity to further his studies in university, he was very familiar with the languages and cultures of various countries. This was what people meant when they said that reading 10,000 books was not as good as walking 10,000 miles. "Yes, we can speak." One of the young men, who was more than 8 feet tall, looked at Yang Qindong with some vigilance and answered, "Very good." Yang Qindong didn't want to speak in bird language. It would be great if the other party could speak Chinese. He smiled and nodded. "Then I'll have to trouble you to take me to see your patriarch. Don't worry, I have no ill intentions." As he said this, Yang Qindong deliberately spread out his hands to show that he didn't have any weapons. He looked harmless and friendly. In fact, Yang Qindong really didn't have any intention of doing anything to these people. Unless they were hostile forces, otherwise Yang Qindong would treat everyone he met here as his quasi-citizens. He could become a member of Yangxia at any time. How could he do something that would harm his own strength? Yang Qindong spoke politely, but the young man knew that he had no other choice. Seeing that the other party had over 10,000 cavalrymen, they didn't even need to lift a finger to deal with the 20 of them. All they needed to do was to spit at them. However, they didn't take action immediately. Instead, they wanted to settle the problem peacefully. This was already giving them a lot of face. "Please." Knowing that he had no other choice, the young man nodded in the end. He then turned around and led Yang Qindong back to the tribe's tent. Yang Qindong's party still had 4 people, and they were moving forward at a moderate pace. Although there were only 4 of them, each of them was more powerful than the other. Even if there were 10 times more of them, they would not be afraid, not to mention that there were only 20 or so saber-wielding youngsters. It was only a tribe of about 100 people. Their territory was not large. After traveling for tens of meters, they arrived at a tent that seemed to be in good condition. Yang Qindong happily dismounted from his horse and looked at the unguarded tent. He asked, "Here?" "Yes." The young man just nodded and didn't make much of an introduction. Then he looked at Yang Qindong with his big eyes. Obviously he was paying attention to his every move. "Hee," Yang Qindong chuckled, thinking in his heart, "Is this a test of my courage? Does he need to get a group of executioners to throw cups as a signal? But I don't think a small tribe like this has such strength." Yang Qindong, who didn't want to be looked down upon, decided to enter the tent to take a look. Beta Persei wanted to rush in first to observe the environment, but he was stopped by him. The 5-star army suddenly appeared here, so it was impossible for the other party to set up an ambush. And even if there was, with his strength as a grandmaster, why would he be afraid? Under the slightly scrutinizing gaze of the white man, Yang Qindong casually lifted the curtain and walked in empty-handed. Just this boldness alone made the white man nod involuntarily. In his heart, his impression of Yang Qindong increased by a lot. He lifted the curtain and entered the tent. The first thing that caught his eye was a warm breath. With just a quick glance, Yang Qindong calculated that there were at least 30 people in the tent. Among them, women and children were the most, and the elderly were the least. Among them, the old man sitting in the middle of the tent stood out even more. Unlike the other people in the tent, when the other people's faces were filled with fear, the old man in the tent was calmly looking at Yang Qindong. Yang Qindong was also looking at the old man. He had a feeling that this old man must have a story. At least, he should have seen a lot of life and death situations. Otherwise he wouldn't be so calm. Both sides were looking at each other, but no one spoke first. After about 10 breaths of time, Beta Persei finally couldn't help but shout outside the tent, "Young master, are you okay?" "I'm fine, go get some food and drink and send it in," Yang Qindong said without turning his head. Then he strode towards the old man and said with a smile on his face, "How should I address you, sir?" The old man had never seen such a calm and collected person entering the tent alone in his entire life. Unconsciously, he put away a short knife hidden in his sleeve and forced a smile on his face. "I'm Jurovsky, the chief of these people. How should I address you, sir?" Yang Qindong could indeed be called a distinguished guest. Just the golden robe on his body was not ordinary. It was dazzling. "So it's the chief of a tribe. Sorry for the disrespect. My name is Yang Qindong, and the people on the grassland also call me Tian Khan." Yang Qindong chuckled and strode to the old man's side. Then he casually sat down cross-legged. The moment the heavenly Khan's name was mentioned, the expressions of everyone in the tent changed. Then all sorts of fear and dread filled their faces once again. The name Tian Khan was now only used on the Mongols. As the Russians who had been ruled by the Mongols for more than 200 years, they both hated and feared them. It was not an exaggeration to say that many times, the words "Mongols are here" could stop babies from crying. Yang Qindong saw everyone's reaction, and he wanted to explain something. However, before he could speak, the chief called Jurovsky spoke first. Don't panic. He's different from ordinary Mongols." The chief said this in Russian, so Yang Qindong naturally heard it clearly. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "Why am I different from other Mongols? You can understand Russian?" The old man was shocked at first, but he quickly calmed down. It was obvious that in this area, the Russians and Mongols interacted with each other, and there was no distinction between them. The language was also a little messy. Just like how the Russians could speak Chinese and Mongolian, why couldn't they speak Russian? After the old man's reprimand, the tent quietened down. The chief looked at Yang Qindong and asked, "Tian Khan? Forgive this old man for being slow, but it seems that other than the noble Genghis Khan, no one else dares to use this name." "That's right." Yang Qindong smiled and nodded. He did not expect the chieftain to be so knowledgeable. However, there was one thing he had to correct. "I am not a Mongol. I am a Han Chinese. The title, Heavenly Khan, is a form of respect for me." "You're not a Mongol? You're a Han?" Jurovsky's face flashed with surprise for the first time. Then he thought of something and asked, "But what's the relationship between the Tian Khan and the Han people in the Far East?" He didn't expect the old man to know about the Han people in the Far East. Yang Qindong was also interested. "You know about them?" "That's right, we're together." When he heard Yang Qindong admit it, the chief's expression relaxed a little. He then said, "I've been to the Far East before. I even moved stones there and helped build the city. I even received some wages. The Han people there are not bad." "Wages? Not bad?" Yang Qindong didn't understand this information. Since the old man had been to the Far East, why didn't he live there? This was much better than wandering around. With doubts in his heart, Yang Qindong asked, "I didn't expect the chief to have help there. But what's your impression of the place?" "Impression?" The chief seemed to recall and said, "It's not bad. At least they don't discriminate against us Russians. We're paid well. Although it's not as much as the Han people, it's still not bad. The city is very grand, but they don't allow us to live there." "It's a pity. They don't allow you to live there?" It was the first time Yang Qindong heard about this. He couldn't help but tremble. "Yes, they don't allow us to live there. They say we're not Han people." When Jurovsky said this, his expression became a little gloomy. Hearing this, Yang Qindong smiled bitterly in his heart. He had told Qinbo that those who weren't of his race would have different intentions. However, it didn't mean that other people were not allowed to live in the city except for the Han people. Just like the beginning city, not all of the people living there were Han people. Many of them were from various Mongolian tribes. Even foreign merchants who came from afar were allowed to live in the city. As long as they could prove their identity and were not hostile or dangerous, they had the right to live in the city. The only difference was that they had to pay a higher price than the Han people. Yang Qindong knew why the Far East hadn't developed in the past few years. It must be because the policy was wrong. Speaking of Qinbo, his ability to lead an army and fight a war was not bad. However, he was better at persuading people. Otherwise, he wouldn't have become one of the earliest political commissars in the Cold Front. It was a pity that he didn't have the experience of building a city, nor did he have the opportunity to learn. He just did it based on his own ideas. It was inevitable that he would take a lot of wrong paths. He also didn't know how to mobilize the people and how to rely on the people to build a base. Chapter 1372. Thinking of this, Yang Qindong was even more confident about the 3-year agreement. In the past he couldn't find the root of the problem, but now he knew where the mistake was. As long as he corrected it, the development of the Far Eastern Prefecture would improve. Perhaps in less than 3 years, everything would change and the Yang faction would have another large base of operations. If he wanted to change, he had to start with himself. Thinking of this, Yang Qindong stood up. Seeing Jurovsky's confused look, Yang Qindong stood up and bowed to him. This bow frightened Jurovsky. He would never forget that the Heavenly Khan had 10,000 cavalrymen just outside the tent. Now that he was on the chopping block, how could he accept such a great bow? Jurovsky wanted to get up and move out of the way, but Yang Qindong had already turned around and bowed to everyone in the tent. His voice rang out, "What happened in the Far Eastern region was unfair to everyone. Since I, the Heavenly Khan, am here, I naturally have to change. Like this, if you want to settle down in the Far Eastern region in the future, you can come at any time. I swear in the name of the Heavenly Khan that when that time comes, as long as you are willing, you can live in the city. No one will chase you away." The so-called relying on the people to establish a base. It referred to uniting more people to fight against the enemy. Of course, it was not only the Hans who would unite, but also the local natives, the nearby Russians, and the Mongols who were willing to turn over a new leaf. In fact, uniting more people meant uniting more people who were willing to stop fighting, willing to work for peace and willing to work for a better future. As long as they were willing, regardless of race, skin color, or region, they would unite together. Only then could the Far Eastern region gain the strongest influence in the shortest time possible and establish a firm foothold. As for the problem of those who were not of the same race, that would be treated differently in the future. It would be fine as long as they did not give the foreign races more power and status. This did not mean that all the foreign races were enemies. If that was the case, there would be no need to talk about unifying the world. Furthermore, without the foreign races as a foil, how could the Hans show off their noble status? It was like returning home in glory. He had to let more people know about it. Otherwise, it would lose its original meaning of traveling in the night. What? Upon seeing Yang Qindong's vow, Jurovsky's eyes widened as he stared at Yang Qindong in disbelief. In addition to shock, there was also doubt in his eyes. Yang Qindong looked like he was in his 30s, and because his martial realm had reached the Grandmaster realm, he looked even younger. Could such a young man really do what he said? Most importantly, he didn't have the final say. Yang Qindong seemed to have noticed the doubt in the other party's eyes. He chuckled and said, "Yes or no, the chief only needs to go to the Far Eastern Prefecture to take a look." Jarovs nodded. "That's right, whether it's real or fake we'll know when the time comes." At this moment, the curtain of the tent opened from the outside, and Beta Persei Ba Daojiang, and Tian who walked into the tent with a pile of food. As long as the conditions were met, Yang Qindong would never wrong himself. This time, not only did he bring military provisions like compressed biscuits, but he also brought instant noodles, ham sausages, various canned food and cigarettes. As the three of them entered, all kinds of food were quickly piled up together. These beautifully packaged food were all things that Jurovsky and his people had never seen before. "Come, have a taste." Yang Qindong took a ham sausage with a smile on his face, tore it open and chewed it in his mouth. There were also some canned food, and after opening it, the aroma overflowed. Soon, the sound of people swallowing their saliva could be heard in the tent. The elderly and women could still restrain themselves as much as possible, but the children couldn't. Originally, because of the heavy snow, they ran out of food a long time ago. They mainly relied on catching some small fish by the river and killing some sheep and horses. How could they have seen such a dazzling array of good food? "Eat as much as you want, this is originally for you." Yang Qindong couldn't help but chuckle when he saw the children's longing eyes and the adults' forceful control of their gazes. However, the children didn't move. Although some of them were already drooling, they still controlled themselves and only looked at Chief Jurovsky. "Let's eat," Jurovsky said after a slight hesitation. Although he didn't know why the Heavenly Khan was so good to him, since the food was already in front of him, it would be a waste if he didn't eat it. Even if there was danger, he could die with a full stomach, right? After receiving permission, the children rushed towards the pile of food until their hands could no longer carry anything else. Then they hurriedly returned to their mother's side. What followed was the sound of wolfing down the food. At this moment, even people who didn't have an appetite would feel hungry after seeing the children's performance. With food as a bridge, Yang Qindong quickly became friends with Jurovsky and the others. After 2 crude cigars were lit and placed in their mouths, Jurovsky no longer had any guard against Yang Qindong. Yang Qindong smiled. The first step was to remove their guard, and the second step was to strengthen their relationship. The next step was to integrate everyone and become one of them. Yang Qindong naturally had his own way of doing this. Simply put, it was nothing more than bait. Humans die for wealth and birds die for food. After a person filled their stomach, the next thing to consider was how to obtain more wealth so that they wouldn't starve anymore. Yang Qindong, who was very clear about the hearts of these herdsmen, used his trump card, silver. When Yang Qindong explained to Jurovsky that in the future, people other than the Han people would be allowed to live in the Far Eastern region, and not only that, as long as they acknowledged and returned to the Far Eastern region, they would be able to obtain an identity certificate, be allocated farmland, have a job, and have their own house. Jurovsky's eyes lit up when he heard this. Because of the geographical climate, the Far Eastern region was indeed vast and sparsely populated. However, this didn't mean that there were no people here. It was just that the place was too big and there were too many people, so it didn't attract much attention. However, if one were to count carefully, the population here would be at least a few 100,000 or even more. There were countless mountains, forests, and lakes here. There were wild beasts in the mountains and fresh fish in the lakes. These were all things that could fill one's stomach. Compared to the grassland, which only had green grass, it was many times better. Thus, this place had always been very attractive. The reason why people didn't come here was because the winter was too cold and there was no guarantee of safety. However, if they had a place like the Far Eastern region, they would have their own house. Winter wouldn't be so cold and there would be more guarantee of safety. Thus, how could such a place not be attractive? After hearing Yang Qindong's words, Jurovsky nodded solemnly. "Thank you, Khan Tian. Don't worry, I will do my best to tell this good news to the other tribes." Yang Qindong was in a good mood after persuading Jurovsky without much effort. Then he casually asked if anything special had happened in this place recently. This was just a casual question. Yang Qindong didn't think that Jurovsky would know anything. After all, they still didn't know that there was a mutiny in the Far Eastern region. Naturally, they wouldn't know too much about the outside world. What was unexpected was that this was just a casual question, but he actually managed to get some information out of it. Jurovsky actually said something strange. "Heavenly Khan, it's not far from here by the Amuga River. Our tribesmen accidentally saw a group of Mongolian cavalry stationed there." "Mongol cavalry?" When he heard this, Yang Qindong's eyes lit up. He immediately asked, "How many people?" "A few hundred. You can ask Nikolaev for the specifics. He was the one who saw it." After saying this, Jurovsky said something to a woman beside him. The woman nodded and left. Not long after, Nikolaev walked into the tent. Nikolaev was the leader of the young people who blocked the 5-star army. However, when he saw Yang Qindong this time, there was no longer any hostility in his eyes. Instead, there was only gratitude. He was oppressed and ruled by the Mongols since he was born. He lived like an ordinary person. Nikolaev's biggest wish was to be able to eat a full meal. Later he slowly grew up, but this small wish was never fulfilled. After marrying and having children with his wife, who was also of the lower class, he placed this wish on his son. He only hoped that one day his son would be able to eat a full meal. Then, even if he died, he would be able to close his eyes. Today this wish was finally fulfilled. Just now he saw his only son eat a lot of food until he couldn't eat anymore. When he was about to vomit, he cried. Ever since he was young, no matter what difficulties he encountered, even if he didn't eat for a few days, he had never cried. He still used all his strength to fight against fate. However, when he saw his son eat a full meal and his stomach bulge, he finally couldn't control his tears. He felt that his life was worth it. His wish was fulfilled. It was all thanks to Yang Qindong. Now that his benefactor had something to ask him, he naturally didn't hide anything. He told Yang Qindong about how he saw a group of Mongol cavalry a few days ago when he wanted to make something for his son to eat. Chapter 1373. There are about 300 of them. Everyone is riding a horse and carrying a sword. They are like the Khan's soldiers. No, they are not as strong as the Khan's soldiers. Many of them look like they are emaciated and their clothes are old. As a poor man, Nikolaev was very attentive to details. After his description and Jurovsky's judgment, he finally determined that these people should be the Mongolian cavalry. Looking at their flags, they should belong to the Khan of Siberia's soldiers and should be in the reconnaissance category. This should be a group of Mongolian cavalry. Their mission was to be in charge of guarding the perimeter while keeping an eye on any suspicious targets. Once confirmed, they would call their friends and surround them. Phew. Yang Chendong let out a sigh of relief. With just this group of Mongolian cavalry, Yang Chendong could at least conclude that Chinbo and the others were fine. Otherwise, these cavalrymen under the Siberian Khan wouldn't be so careful and set the perimeter so far away. Are you willing to take us to find these Mongolian cavalry? Since he knew the whereabouts of the enemy, Yang Chendong naturally would not let it go so easily. His gaze fell on the young man Nikolaev and asked. Nikolaev's face was a little nervous, but his answer was still straightforward. Yes, I am willing to serve the Khan. He did not understand the five-star army, nor did he understand Yang Chendong. Nikolaev did not know what the consequences would be if he refused. If he angered the Khan, he was afraid that a simple order would be enough to kill all of his people. Good. Come, take out some refined salt and sword for our friends. After Yang Chendong received a satisfactory answer, he laughed and waved his hand. Beta Persei turned around and left. Not long after, he brought the black cavalry to Chief Jurovsky with a few bags of well-packed refined salt and weapons. Refined salt, high-quality refined salt. Jurovsky unceremoniously opened the bag with the dagger in his hand. When he put his finger back into his mouth, he couldn't help but shout excitedly. In ancient times, salt and iron had always been the exclusive property of those in power. It was also one of the items that would not be exported or traded. And in remote places like the Far East, it was impossible to see them. Occasionally, some table salt would appear, but it was also coarse salt. Not only was its quality extremely poor, there were also many impurities in it. Good quality ones could be exchanged for several horses and sheep in one bag. Even so, it was not easy to get some. They were treated as treasures by the tribes. Yang Chendong had given him 4 bags and each bag weighed at least 50 pounds. That was more than 200 pounds and Jurovsky couldn't help but be excited. Jurovsky wasn't the only one who was excited. Nicholas and the others were also very excited. At this time, when they looked at Yang Chendong, there was a hint of trust in their eyes. With just this salt and iron, what was the point of selling their lives to the other party? It had to be said that in such a remote and bitter place, a human's life was the most worthless existence. Sometimes, for a mouthful of food, there would be people who would sell their dignity, strength, and life. Yang Chendong was willing to give out these things. In a sense, Nicholas' life already belonged to him. Without disturbing the celebration of this small tribe, Yang Chendong left the place. While ordering the army to rest, he also called Commander Tian Hu over and told him to prepare to send out a group of cavalry to follow Nicholas to the Amurga River and take down the hundreds of Mongol cavalry. Just treat it as interest. Thinking about how the Far East province had suffered heavy losses from the surprise attack, a murderous intent flashed across Yang Chendong's eyes. It had always been him finding trouble with others. Since someone dared to provoke him, he definitely couldn't let them go. That night, this small Russian tribe didn't sleep at all. They surrounded the salt and iron just like that. Some of the young men also changed their rusty iron weapons under Jurovsky's orders and took out sharp cavalry swords. At this time, the things that Yang Chendong gave them were the hope of their tribe. They definitely couldn't lose them. Nicholas wasn't part of the people protecting the salt and iron. Not only him, but there were also 4 other people who didn't participate in the guard duty last night. Under Jurovsky's orders, they had a good night's rest. Today they would follow the Heavenly Khan to deal with the Mongol cavalry. When Yang Chendong walked out of the tent in the morning, he was also full of energy. After reaching the Grandmaster realm, Yang Chendong could sleep peacefully in any environment as long as he wanted to. This was one of the main reasons why he was full of energy. Tian Hu had already brought 1,000 cavalry and was ready to set off at any time. This time he was going to personally lead the army to kill the enemy, leaving behind Division Commander Taimur with a sad expression. Nicholas had breakfast with the soldiers of the 5-star army, and he saw a satisfied look on the faces of the 5 soldiers. To them, they had never eaten such a delicious breakfast in their lives, let alone enough to fill their stomachs. When Nicholas and the others looked at the 5-star army soldiers after breakfast, their eyes were filled with envy. Beside the Amujia River, There were many military tents here, and from time to time, one could see men in Mongol clothing walking back and forth. Sometimes they would even patrol around the river. Just as Yang Qindong expected, this was the Siberian Khan's cavalry unit. Their mission was to be in charge of the safety of this area, and at the same time, to see if there were any enemies from the Far East who escaped from here. However, their gazes were mostly on the inner side, and they did not pay much attention to the south of the Amujia River. In their eyes, the enemy was in the north, not the south. As for whether or not someone would attack them from the south, it was not a problem for them to consider. There were 300 Mongol cavalry here. Although they were not elites, they were not something that anyone could target. For example, if Chieftain Jurovsky's 100-man tribe encountered them, they would probably run as far away as possible. If they wanted to face 300 Mongol cavalry who lived on horses all year round, they would need at least 1,000 cavalry to dare to take the risk. This was where Ahichi's confidence came from. As the general of the 300 cavalrymen, he had never thought that anyone would harm him. All he thought about was how to find the Far East army that had escaped and then strike at them to gain merit. As such, when Yang Qindong brought 500 black cavalry units to the south of the Amujia River, Ahiki, who received the news, did not panic. Instead, he calmly walked out of the tent. When his subordinates reported that there was a cavalry unit in black armor outside the tent, Ahiki did not believe it and thought that it was an exaggeration. No matter if it was in Siberia or the Far East, iron was hard to find. If a normal person could get a good weapon, they would be proud of it for a long time. Who would be able to make armor out of iron? That was not a waste but a luxury. Even the personal guards of Khan Hulahan only had leather armor on their upper bodies, which was already very enviable. With disbelief, Ahiki walked out of the tent. As expected, he saw a sea of black armor, and his eyes were filled with greed. Even though there were 500 cavalry, far more than the 300 he brought with him, there was no fear in his eyes. However, there was no trace of fear in Ahichi's eyes. Perhaps it was because he had not had an opponent for many years, but he was used to treating everyone as prey. Even if there were 500 Black Knight Dragon Guards, he still thought the same. He was already used to treating this area as his own backyard. Ahiki did not think that there was anyone he could not defeat. Even if there were more enemies than him and their equipment was better than his, it was still the same. War is not about who has better equipment. Ahiki muttered to himself. He then raised his right hand above his head and shouted, "All troops gather." The 300 Mongolian cavalry had already gotten on their horses. When they heard the general's order, they quickly gathered around Ahiki in groups of 10. It was said that small details revealed true ability. Just based on how quickly the Mongolian cavaliers gathered together, this was a group of well-trained cavaliers. This was especially so when there was a rare look of fearlessness in their eyes, and this was something that was rarely seen among the five-star armies. Haha. Yang Qindong, who was riding on the white dragon, also laughed. He did not think that there was anything special about this Mongolian cavalry. He had seen many such opponents, and the strongest was the Wala cavalry led by Yeshen. But what was the result? Didn't they still lose at his hands? They had once looked down on the five-star army, but reality would give them a slap in the face. He also did not think that this Mongolian cavalry was that strong. Young master. Yang Er, who had been following Wang Chong from the side, had an excited expression on his face. It was rare for him to encounter an opponent who did not run away. Although there were only 300 of them, they had successfully aroused Yang Er's fighting spirit. I'll give you 100 long way. Go. Yang Qindong said casually as if he was talking about something very normal. The black cavalry moved out. Under Beta Persei's lead and Ba Dao Zhang's support, a group of 102 cavalry jumped over the Amurga River and headed straight for their target. Nicholas and the other 4 also wanted to urge their horses forward, but they were stopped by Cho Wu, who was standing at the side. This made the 5 of them puzzled. Did they not need to fight? After Yang Qindong took out a large amount of salt and iron to give to his tribe, Nicholas and the other 4 had already sold their lives to the 5-star army. They were even prepared to be members of the 5-star army. This was the rule. After receiving benefits from others, they naturally had to work for them. Chapter 1374. The 5 of them were even prepared to die in battle. However, when Chiovi stopped them, the 5 of them realized that the 5-star army was different from other armies. They did not need them to risk their lives. Could it be that they were really helping their tribe for free? The other 4 people were led by Nikoliv. After being stopped, their gazes naturally fell on him. Let's wait and see. Nikoliv, who was also at a loss, could only say this. At the same time he looked at the battlefield. He could not understand why the 5-star army only sent out 100 cavalry even though they had more people. What was the reason for this? Very quickly Nikolaev had an answer. Everything that happened on the battlefield told him that there was only one reason why the 5-star army only sent out 100 cavalry. These Mongol cavalry were not worth sending out more cavalry. The black cavalry leaped over the river and the distance between the two sides was getting closer and closer. When they were less than 4 li away, Ahuchi shouted, 100 cavalry on each side, charge. Ahuchi thought that he had seen through the situation and that the enemy had sent out 100 cavalry to test the waters. This was his chance. He only needed to kill these 100 cavalry as quickly as possible and take advantage of the fact that the enemy had not reacted to the situation to kill them. Then the situation would be settled. When he thought about how the enemy's black armor would increase his army's combat strength by at least 50%, he began to laugh maniacally. It was truly a blessing from the gods that such a good preparation was placed in front of him. There was no reason for him not to accept it. On the battlefield, the 200 Mongol cavalry shouted and made all sorts of noises. They spread out and surrounded the 100 black cavalry. Although there were only 200 of them because their formation was too spread out, it actually gave off a strong momentum. They either went towards the left wing or the right wing. Some even went towards the middle. The sabers in their hands continuously spun as they prepared to strike. On the other hand, the 100 black cavalry soldiers also spread out. With Beta Persei, Ba Dao Jiang, Pengyu and the others at the tip of the arrows, they formed groups of around a dozen people, and they tore through the air like arrows that left their bows. They headed straight for Ahuchi, who was protected by 100 Mongolian cavaliers. It was as if no matter where the wind blew he would just go all the way. Fire! Fire! Ahuchi's face revealed a trace of panic when he saw that the incoming enemy did not care about being surrounded and instead went straight for the root of the problem. Although there were only 100 of them, for some reason they gave him a great sense of pressure. It was like being stared at by a wild beast on a grassland. With a command, the 100 cavalrymen beside him quickly took out their strong bows, knocked their arrows and began to shoot. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, arrows pierced through the air unceasingly, their target being the 100 black cavalry soldiers who were charging straight at them. At the same time, a large number of Mongolian cavaliers also surged in from the left and right of the black cavalry. It was not an exaggeration to say that there was an ambush from all sides. At that moment, the black cavalry had already met with dozens of Mongolian cavaliers in front of them. Their black clothes and black armor allowed them to ignore normal arrows. At that moment, they only needed to swing their swords and kill the enemies who were charging at them. Clang clang clang. The Black Knight Dragon Guards did not show any signs of slowing down, nor did they make any movements to dodge. They allowed the arrows to hit their bodies, and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. Then the sabers in their hands clashed with the sabers of the Mongolian cavalry in front of them. Then an unbelievable scene appeared. The Mongolian cavaliers who were riding on their horses with ferocious expressions were stunned on the spot. It was as if their acupoints had been sealed. They did not move at all and allowed the black cavalry soldiers beside them to jump past them as if they did not know what was going on. This scene shocked Nikolaev, who was watching the battle. This scene shocked Ahuchi, who was commanding the battle. This scene shocked the Mongolian cavaliers who were flanking them from the left and right. A scene that should not have happened on the battlefield happened just like that. But everyone knew that swords and sabers had no eyes on the battlefield. Often the outcome of a battle could be decided in an instant. There was absolutely no room for the slightest bit of absent-mindedness or carelessness because it often meant that one was already walking together with the god of death. But now, it was not just one Mongolian cavalier, but dozens of Mongolian cavaliers who were standing there. It was as if a spell had been cast on them and they did not move at all. This scene was so real that it caused everyone who saw it to have a big question in their hearts. They could not help but ask in their hearts, "What is going on? What is going on now?" While most people were still confused, Beta Persei led the black cavalry and did not stop charging forward. They continued to charge forward bravely and soon, they reached Ahuchi's camp and stood in front of the Mongolian general. Kill? Ahuchi was also puzzled as to why his cavaliers did not move. However, with the enemy before them he could not care so much. He clamped his legs on his horse and rode forward with his saber raised. Dang dang dang. When the two sides came into contact, they exchanged 3 saber blows in an extremely short period of time. Only the most elite cavaliers could achieve such a speed. Only the veterans who were one with their horses could do it so skillfully. The black cavalry slashed 3 times in a short period of time. Ahuchi and the others who were passively defending also blocked 3 saber blows. A huge force traveled down the saber to their arms, causing the arms of the 100 Mongolian cavaliers to tremble uncontrollably. Shock rose in their hearts. Not only was the speed of their opponent's saber extremely fast, the strength was also extraordinary. He was definitely a tough opponent. Before the shock in their hearts could completely disappear, an even more shocking scene appeared. After blocking the 3 slashes, they were shocked to find that the sabers in their hands had actually broken into 2. This sudden scene shocked everyone, causing them to be at a loss for what to do. They were completely shocked, just like the dozens of Mongolian riders earlier. Their minds were blank as they sat on their horses, forgetting everything. How could they have known that the Black Cavalry Dragon Guards had already changed their weapons to divine sabers? This was something that Yang Qindong had specially brought out from the military factory in Crimson City. As Yang Xie gained more and more iron ore, his forging skills continued to improve. The quality of the sabers also increased greatly. Every new divine saber lived up to its name. Not only were the sabers thinner and lighter than normal sabers, they were also sharper and had reached a state where they could cut through iron like mud. In just 3 saber blows, they were able to cut the enemy's saber in half. This showed how powerful and tough the saber was. Get down from your horses. Beta Persei and the others, who had succeeded in one strike, reined in their horses. Then they swung their arms and used the backs of their sabers to smack down on the backs of the Mongolian cavaliers who were still standing on their horses with shocked expressions. Under the powerful force, the Mongolian cavaliers who were unable to defend themselves in time fell down from their horses like dumplings. 100 Mongolian cavaliers, including a Hechi, were all captured at the start of the fight. This sudden scene also shocked the Mongolian cavaliers who were charging over from both sides. In their eyes, a Hechi and the others were captured the moment they came into contact with the Black Cavalry. How did this trick work? They really could not understand it. It was only when the dozens of Mongolian cavaliers who were fighting against the Black Knights and Dragon Guards on the battlefield suddenly shouted and ran in all directions with their broken sabers in hand that the other Mongolian cavaliers noticed that the weapons in their comrades' hands had been broken into 2 at some point in time. They finally figured out what had happened and why their general had been taken captive in a single encounter. The remaining 100 or so Mongolian cavaliers suddenly changed their direction of charge. They no longer fought against the Black Cavalry. Instead, they ran in all directions. A group of cavaliers dressed in black armor and equipped with spirit. They could ignore the arrows fired from afar and also had sabers that could cut through iron like mud. This kind of opponent was not someone they could fight against. Since they could not win, they could only run. They had to report this news to the Khan. Not good, they want to run. Nikolaev instinctively shouted and immediately rode out. The scene that had just happened in front of him had stimulated him greatly. In their eyes, they were invincible and there was nothing they could not win. Wherever they appeared, it was as if a gust of wind had swept through and not a single blade of grass grew. Once any of the Russian tribes met them, they would usually run away before the battle even started. Yet, it was precisely such a powerful existence that was unable to withstand a single blow from the Black Knight Dragon Guards. In just a single exchange, the Black Knight Dragon Guards were defeated. This was simply too unbelievable and unbelievable. After the shock, Nikolaev's eyes were filled with killing intent. The Mongolian cavaliers were defeated. Was this not the time for him to collect the blood debt? He thought about how his tribe originally had more than 1,000 people, but after being attacked by the Mongolian cavaliers time and time again, there were only a few hundred people left. How great was this hatred? Even in his dreams he wanted to take revenge. He could only hate the fact that his strength was limited. Now that the opportunity had finally appeared, how could he let go of this chance to beat the dog in the water? Nikolaev wanted to chase after the enemy, and the 4 companions beside him did the same. However, before they could truly run out, arrows tore through the air and landed on the Mongolian cavalrymen who were trying to escape one after another or on their war horses. Tian, who appeared with 1,000 cavaliers. They had been lying in ambush for a long time in order to surround the enemy and not give anyone a chance to escape. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.